As the elevator doors opened on the floor where my department was located, I stepped out with confidence. The moment I spotted my manager, Michael, I called out loudly, "Michael!" I've just cleared up the misunderstanding with the client. After delivering my report, I noticed a familiar face. That face turned to look at me, too. There's no way she would remember me. Even if she did, there's no way she'd recognize a plain-looking Japanese man who's now aged into an ordinary middle-aged face. But to my surprise, the blonde beauty rushed over to me. "My name is James. I'm 37 years old. I joined this company mid-career, but my sales performance has been poor. Every day, I endure Michael's scolding, 'Hey, do you understand the situation? You need to start delivering results.'" Michael ran his hand through his hair and sighed. "You said during your interview that you were passionate about working here, which is why I hired you. So how come you can't close any deals? Honestly, I'd like to know the answer to that myself. I am passionate. I want to secure contracts and sell our products for the company's sake. But for some reason, my enthusiasm seems to backfire. When I'm in front of clients, I can't say what I need to say. And it never leads to a signed deal. I can barely manage to say half of what I practiced. No matter how many simulations I run or how much I rehearse at home, as soon as I realize the client is about to make a decision, I freeze. The result is always the same. You're just not cut out for sales. Maybe you should think about switching careers. I've thought the same thing myself. Sales isn't my strong suit." But I still bowed my head deeply and said, "No, I want to keep trying. Please, give me another chance." Michael let out another sigh. "Since you can't close deals, I have to do it myself. If you keep dragging your feet, you might end up getting fired. I'll go handle some cold calls. You stay here and finish up that paperwork." With that, Michael left the office for an unplanned sales call. I bowed deeply to his retreating back and turned to work on the documents. This kind of work, I'm actually good at. Frustration and a sense of futility filled me as I thought about how I couldn't contribute to the company's profits as a salesperson. Still, I've got to do my best. For the company's sake. I will. I murmured to myself as I returned to work. Months passed after that. With some help from Michael, I started to secure contracts here and there. Even so, compared to my colleagues, my performance was still far behind. However, the small successes gave me a bit of confidence, and I found myself panicking less during client meetings. Michael even remarked, "Looks like you're finally getting the hang of it," which made me incredibly happy. One day, an unusual morning meeting was called. Listen up. The CEO from the US is visiting next week. My heart skipped a beat when I heard that. Apparently, they're coming because the post-acquisition performance has fallen below expectations. They'll be conducting a review to identify issues. It's a deeply embarrassing visit for us. Michael's words silenced the murmurs in the room. For the next week, work yourselves to the bone and boost those numbers, even a little. This is an American company now. Be ready for the possibility that they might decide to cut us loose if they find us unnecessary. Straightening up at Michael's words, we all replied firmly. The company had been acquired by an American firm a year ago. I joined after the acquisition, but most of my department had been here since before. They told me they were nervous about restructuring and layoffs at first, but things stayed relatively unchanged until now. But this sudden visit from the CEO, and for such a reason, poor performance, put everyone on edge. Naturally, my own targets were raised higher than ever before. The CEO may have turned a blind eye up until now, but this is a situation serious enough to bring them here personally. Get those contracts signed no matter what. Do you understand? At Michael's stern order, I hurriedly left the department. I threw myself into sales with everything I had. I wanted to bring back results that would reassure the CEO, even if only slightly. With that determination, I tackled countless cold calls, something I was still far from comfortable with. The results? Better than usual, but only slightly better. A sense of shame smoldered inside me. On top of that, Michael had the nerve to say, "For you, this is actually pretty good work." Even though my performance still didn't hold a candle to my coworkers. I clenched my teeth in frustration at my own lackluster results. The following week, the day of the CEO's visit finally arrived. The tension in the office was palpable, and I'd already worked up a sweat helping clean the premises since early morning. Amidst all this, the phone rang, and Michael answered it. Soon after, I heard him calling for me. "James! Get over here, now!" His voice echoed through the department, carrying an unmistakable urgency. It seemed there was a complaint. Apparently, the number of contracted units didn't match the number delivered. What? But, after signing the contract, I discussed with their rep and they decided to increase the order. That's what happened. Frantically trying to explain, I rifled through my desk. Here's a copy of the additional contract. I showed it to Michael, but he looked exasperated. They said they weren't aware of any additions. Just go over there and fix this. On the day the CEO was visiting, of all times. Michael cradled his head in his hands while I quickly bowed. Understood. I'll head over immediately, I said, gathering the necessary documents and rushing out of the department. I arrived at the first floor via the elevator. Near the reception desk, a crowd of people had gathered, and among them was a blonde-haired woman. Ah! A small sound escaped my lips before I could stop it. At that moment, another elevator opened, and Michael came storming out. James! Seriously, you forgot this. You can't fix anything without it. Michael was fuming, waving the additional contract in his hand. Oh. In my haste, I had apparently left the additional contract with Michael after showing it to him earlier. Pull yourself together. Take a deep breath, James. Deep breath. All right, now go. Following Michael's instructions, I took a deep breath and dashed out the door at his signal. As I moved, I thought I caught a faint trace of perfume in the air. A few hours later, I returned to the office, utterly exhausted. The person with whom I had originally finalized the additional contract had called in sick, leaving me to negotiate persistently with one of the other representatives from the earlier meeting. The image of blonde hair flickered in my mind repeatedly. Each time, it gave me a strange sense of courage. In the end, I managed to persuade them about the additional contract, and they agreed to proceed with the delivery as planned. They even saw me off with a smile. But it felt like I had poured every ounce of energy I had into the effort, leaving me utterly drained. I wanted nothing more than to head straight home, but I had to report back first. At the company's entrance, I straightened my posture, summoning what little strength I had left, and walked through the automatic doors. Riding the elevator up to my department's floor, I stepped out with determination. The moment I spotted Michael, I raised my voice. Michael! I've resolved the client's misunderstanding. After delivering my report, I noticed a familiar face. That face was looking at me, too. There's no way she remembers me. Even if she does, she wouldn't recognize a plain Japanese face that's now aged into a middle-aged one. But contrary to my expectations, the blonde beauty ran straight toward me and exclaimed, "James," before throwing her arms around me in a hug. The people around us were stunned, and I didn't understand what was happening either. I stared at her in disbelief. "Cindy, could it be, do you remember me?" I asked in English. Her eyes sparkled as she nodded emphatically. "Of course I remember. James. I've missed you. What are you doing here?" I couldn't help but smile faintly. "Sales. I wanted to be helpful to you in some way. Though, my performance has been terrible. It was only then that I noticed the stares from those around us. Embarrassed, I stepped back from Cindy and began explaining. The truth is, as a child, I had lived in the US because of my parents' work. I spent so much time abroad that I even forgot how to speak Japanese at one point. During those years, my favorite hobby was creating my own games. I loved programming. Games, which transcended language barriers, became a source of comfort for me, especially as a kid. I wanted to create games that could transcend the boundaries of countries. With that dream in my heart, I devoted myself to game development from a young age. It was during high school that I met Cindy. With her radiant blonde hair, flawless skin, and striking features, she was incredibly popular, not to mention wealthy. She was always surrounded by a group of friends, like an entourage. Honestly, she seemed like someone who existed in a completely different world from mine. One day, while I was sitting outside reading a book, Cindy passed by. Many of the students at school had never seen the colorful packed lunches that Japanese students often brought, and they were intrigued. But a few in her group pointed at me and muttered words like poor. Cindy and her friends always ate lunch in the cafeteria. It was apparently a sign of being wealthy. But I loved the lunches my mother made for me. I wasn't eating a packed lunch and reading to pass the time because I was poor. That conviction ran deep within me, so their comments didn't bother me at all. Then, one of Cindy's entourage spoke to me. They started rambling on about how Cindy was the daughter of a major corporation CEO and would eventually inherit the company. The details I hadn't asked for. That must be tough, I replied casually. Cindy asked me in a calm voice. Are you saying that my life is tough? I tilted my head slightly. Well, I can't say for sure if it's tough for you. But if I were in your position, I'd think it's tough. Cindy bit her lip lightly. I'm rich and privileged, so it's not tough. I studied her face carefully. Being rich doesn't mean life isn't tough. Being privileged doesn't mean life isn't hard. Everyone has their struggles. Taking on the pressure of running a big company someday, isn't that tough? Cindy's eyes widened slightly as if she'd been struck by my words. Her friends chimed in, Cindy's smart, so there's no way it's tough for her. I don't think that's right. Just because someone is privileged doesn't mean their life isn't tough. You shouldn't make assumptions like that. With that, I dropped my gaze back to my book. I felt like arguing wouldn't lead anywhere. Cindy and her entourage left, seemingly unimpressed by my response. But from that day forward, Cindy started speaking to me occasionally. She'd glance at the programming books I was reading and say things like, "Do you actually understand what this says, James?" It's all Greek to me. While furrowing her brow. Sometimes, she'd say things like, I feel like having lunch outside today, but honestly, eating with so many friends, isn't that your thing, James? Whatever, it doesn't matter. Then, during lunch, Cindy appeared in front of me, glancing around nervously to make sure no one saw her. I snuck out through the small bathroom window. They're probably all looking for me right now. Hey, we can't stay here, they'll find us. Let's go somewhere else. She said this with a mischievous grin, but I shook my head and tried to reason with her. It's not fair for your friends to keep searching for you. Should I tell them you're feeling unwell? Cindy's eyes widened in surprise. James, even though they said all those mean things to you. Are you telling me it's wrong for people like that to go around looking for me? I smiled wryly and nodded. That wasn't even close to being mean enough to bother me. I then explained a harmless excuse to her group and let them know Cindy was fine. Afterward, Cindy and I shared lunch together. Soon after, Cindy openly announced to everyone that she'd be eating lunch with me from then on. She even said with a bright smile that she wanted it to be just the two of us. From that day forward, Cindy and I began having lunch together alone. Eventually, our lunches turned into something more, and we naturally began dating. Dating Cindy was pure joy. Every time we met, I found myself falling more in love with her, and Cindy stayed close by my side, always supportive. As for the future, I tried not to think about it. A rich heiress to a major company and a plain, unremarkable Japanese guy like me. There was no way it could work out in the long run. But we were young, and we didn't dwell on such thoughts. Instead, we immersed ourselves in our sweet romance. Things changed during our second year of high school. My parents decided to move back to Japan, and naturally, I had to go with them. I declared to Cindy that I would return to the US for college and come back to her. Cindy said, "Our company is aiming to expand into the IT industry. We need someone like you, James. A genius who can create games on his own. If you contribute to our company, I'm sure we'll be able to get married. So, promise me you'll come back," with such conviction that we decided to try a long-distance relationship between Japan and the US. I truly believed we could make it work. But as young as we were, we lacked the patience for it. The time difference between the US and Japan made communication challenging. Back then, international calls were not something you could make casually. Though Cindy's family was wealthy, her parents didn't allow her to spend money frivolously. They believed in raising her with grounded values. As for me, I came from a typical middle-class family. Frequent international calls and long conversations weren't something we could afford. The internet was still in its early stages, which only added to the frustration. It was Cindy who broke first. "Why don't you call me? Why are you always so tired?" she asked. I was struggling in Japan, trying to prepare for admission to an American university. The American curriculum was completely different, and just keeping up with my high school classes was hard enough. I felt bad, but my responses to her became more and more neglectful. After countless arguments, Cindy quietly said, "Goodbye." At that time, I didn't have the energy to beg her to stay. "I've met someone else." "I can't help it, we never see each other," she said. I nodded weakly. "I'll always wish for your happiness, Cindy. I'll pray from Japan for your company's success." Those were the last words I said to Cindy. And so, we broke up. Without the goal of returning to the US, I enrolled in a Japanese university and eventually joined a major company as a systems engineer. Despite my ordinary appearance, I was recognized as a genius programmer, highly valued for my technical skills and contributions to the company. Because I was so well regarded, I attracted a fair amount of attention from women, and there were times when things seemed promising. But I was naturally shy and always busy with work. Those opportunities eventually fizzled out, and I settled into a solitary lifestyle. One day, I came across shocking news. Cindy had become the CEO of her family's company after her father's sudden death. The ambitious new CEO was expanding aggressively, even acquiring a Japanese company. And she plans to further expand the business, even from Japan. I can still help Cindy, I muttered to myself. With that determination, I submitted my resignation to the company where I had worked for many years. I applied to the company Cindy's had acquired, despite having no experience in sales. During the interview, I passionately explained my reasons for wanting to join, and somehow, I got the job. The high turnover of anxious employees following the acquisition was probably one reason why an inexperienced person like me was hired. And so, here I was, struggling to secure contracts but still working as an employee of Cindy's company. When I finished telling my story to my colleagues, they were all wide-eyed with disbelief. Taking an unfamiliar job for a woman you broke up with nearly 20 years ago? That's reckless to the point of insanity, one of them said. I smiled bitterly. I think so too. Honestly, I feel like a leech, not being able to contribute much. I scratched my head and turned to face Cindy. But I'll do my best to be of help someday. Please let me keep working here. I bowed deeply to her. Cindy smiled faintly. Silly man. With that, she turned on her heel and walked toward the elevator. I've identified the main issues. I'll send you my improvement plan by next month. Leaving those words behind, Cindy stepped into the elevator and quickly left the department. Feeling a twinge of sadness, I returned to my work. After work, I found myself trudging home, lost in thought. I hadn't seen Cindy again after that. She was probably busy inspecting other floors, but she never returned to the sales department. A few hours later, I heard that the CEO had already completed her inspection and left. My heart sank. Just a little. I had allowed myself to hope, even if just a little. If she still felt nostalgic about me, maybe she'd come back to the sales department. Maybe we'd exchange contact information, at the very least. I knew she was still single. The faint hope I had that maybe, since she didn't have anyone in her life, there might still be a chance, was completely shattered. She's probably already on a plane by now. She must be incredibly busy. Flying all the way to Japan, not even sightseeing, and heading straight back. Just thinking about it made my head spin. Turning into the narrow alley, I approached the apartment building where I lived. When I casually looked up at the door to my second-floor unit, I nearly jumped out of my skin. Cindy was standing there, smiling and waving at me. "Hi. I've been waiting for you." The sight of the CEO of a massive American corporation, standing in front of the shabby door of my old apartment, dressed in a tailored dress and accompanied by a towering man who was clearly her bodyguard, was beyond surreal. I invited Cindy inside. The man beside her was apparently both her bodyguard and secretary. Cindy told him to wait outside, but I objected. However, I told him that waiting right in front of the door would inconvenience my neighbors. The bodyguard pleaded, explaining that he couldn't be separated from Cindy, no matter what, and asked if he could wait somewhere, anywhere, nearby. In the end, because Cindy insisted on being alone with me, I let the bodyguard wait in my bedroom. Having a bodyguard in my bedroom, this is so weird, I muttered while nervously making tea. Cindy laughed, her voice light and carefree. "It's his job. You could have just let him wait outside." "You're as kind as ever, James." But honestly, I wasn't being kind, I was worried about rumors spreading if a burly man loitered outside my door. Not that it mattered, given that the sight of a blonde beauty and her bodyguard at my apartment had probably already drawn plenty of attention. How do you even know where I live?" Speaking English again after so long felt clumsy. "Who do you think I am?" Cindy replied, a teasing glint in her eyes. "Right. I worked for her company, after all. That's an abuse of power." I muttered in Japanese. Cindy narrowed her eyes sharply. "You haven't changed a bit," James, still muttering in Japanese. "Whenever you don't want me to hear something." Her observation made me stick my tongue out playfully. "Well, it's convenient that you can't speak Japanese." I chuckled, but Cindy pulled out her phone. "Guess I'll let the translator handle it. Technology could be annoyingly efficient sometimes." "So, what is it?" "You tracked down my address, waited for me. You could have just met me at the office." I tried to mask my embarrassment by pouting. Even though her visit filled me with joy, I couldn't help but act composed. Cindy's eyes softened, and she looked at me with a hint of vulnerability. "James, did you not want to see me?" Her question left me speechless. The moment I arrived at the office, I heard someone say James. I turned around immediately, but you were already out the automatic doors. I tried to convince myself it was a mistake, that it wasn't you. But during the whole inspection, I couldn't stop thinking about you. I couldn't focus on anything else. I sighed deeply. I had to go apologize to a client. I wanted to call out to Cindy when I saw her, but you saw me at my worst, didn't you? I glanced at Cindy, who chuckled softly. "You shouldn't forget something as important as a contract." She teased, clearly having overheard Michael's scolding. I turned bright red. "If we were going to meet again, I wanted to look cool," I muttered. Cindy gently placed her hand on my shoulder. "You already do." Her words made me look at her. "No matter what kind of James you are, you're always cool." But if you truly wanted to support me, why didn't you come to the US? Her question made me lower my gaze. Because you broke up with me so thoroughly. Tears welled up in Cindy's eyes. But I wanted to see you all this time. I erased your number and all your contact information to move on, but the James in my heart never disappeared. No matter who I dated, no matter how much I buried myself in work, it was always you. Without thinking, I wrapped Cindy in a tight embrace. I couldn't stop thinking about you either, Cindy. I've always regretted not begging you to stay, not insisting that I wanted to go to the US. I thought about going so many times, but I was too much of a coward. I cupped her cheeks in my hands and rested my forehead against hers. Do you have someone now? Cindy shook her head. That was all the confirmation I needed. I kissed her. She kissed me back. After a sweet, lingering kiss, I gazed into her eyes. Let's start over. Tears rolled down Cindy's cheeks. Yes. Hearing her answer, we kissed again. I completely forgot about the bodyguard waiting in my bedroom. 2 years after reuniting with Cindy, I am now living in the US, not just as her husband but also as a system engineer for her company. I had thought her days were busy, but the reality far exceeded my imagination. Cindy managed a schedule packed to the minute every day, leaving no time for dates in the beginning. Back then, she was surrounded by all kinds of people. There were those who were devoted to her, those scheming to dethrone her, and those trying to ingratiate themselves with her. Particularly, those who had been loyal to her father struggled to accept her leadership. They offered her endless advice, which she found overbearing, and their attachment to her predecessor made her feel like they didn't truly believe in her. As a result, Cindy tried to handle everything herself, trusting no one to help her. It was an unsustainable way to live. I repeatedly urged Cindy to lighten her load, even just a little. Each time, she would respond with, "James, you just don't understand." Just like in high school, I told her, "Everyone loves you, Cindy. You don't have enemies. Trust them." Back in high school, Cindy's friends had been visibly disheartened when she started spending her lunches with me. When we began dating, everyone opposed it, not out of malice but because they cared about her. But all of it, the devotion, the concern, and even the opposition, came from a place of genuine care for Cindy. They simply wanted to be with her. Before her wealth or her status as an heiress, Cindy possessed an innate charm as a person. Anyone who spent time with her was drawn to that charm, feeling an irresistible desire to stay by her side and support her. I felt the same way, so I knew it had to be true. After much persuasion, Cindy finally agreed to delegate some of her work to me. When I first moved to America, I worked as her secretary. Over time, I began redistributing the tasks she entrusted to me, assigning them to the most suitable people. At first, Cindy protested, but as she saw how effectively the work was being managed, she gradually started to trust others. Now, I've stepped away from my role as her secretary and work as a system engineer instead. Being her secretary wasn't my calling. Being able to stay by her side was certainly a perk, but that's not what work is about. I usually get home a little earlier than Cindy. As I walk through the door, I'm greeted by our adorable daughter, cradled in the babysitter's arms. After giving her a big hug, I head straight to the kitchen. While the babysitter keeps my daughter entertained, I start preparing dinner. Cindy always looks forward to my cooking more than anything. So, I put my heart into making delicious meals just for her. "Your food reminds me of our high school lunches," she often says. Back in high school, those packed lunches were lovingly prepared by my mom. Sometimes, Cindy would beg me for a piece of sweet rolled omelet or an octopus-shaped sausage, and I'd happily pop it into her mouth. That memory of happiness stayed with her, and she once asked me to recreate those flavors. I called my mom for the recipes and took Cindy on a picnic where we enjoyed lunch outdoors together. Since then, I've taken over all the cooking. By the time I finish most of the dinner prep, Cindy comes home. I thanked the babysitter and sent her off, leaving the three of us to spend time together as a family. We sit down at the dinner table, sharing a happy meal and talking about the fun moments we had during the day, smiles all around. I can't play on a piano in this state. Let me leave before my reputation gets ruined. The furious voice echoing backstage belonged to the renowned pianist, Ryan Holt. This was a grand hall where Foster Corporation had organized a spectacular concert to impress major sponsors in an effort to rebuild the company. The audience was packed with partner companies and members of the media, making this a crucial event that could determine the company's fate. It was a make-or-break moment, a final gamble for Foster Corporation. However, Ryan refused to perform, claiming the piano was out of tune. "Ryan, please. Just a little more time. If you leave now, we will." Rebecca, the CEO's daughter, pleaded desperately, but Ryan was unmoved. "I see you're desperate, but why should I risk my reputation for your sake?" His tone was cold, his confidence unshakable, as he brushed past the panicked staff trying to stop him. In the audience, the sponsors and business partners were already whispering, their expressions growing doubtful. Rebecca, her face pale, darted her eyes around, desperately searching for a solution, but found none. The stage, set to save Foster Corporation, was now teetering on the brink of disaster. "Then I'll play." The moment those words left my mouth, the room fell silent. It was as if time had frozen, with every pair of eyes suddenly fixed on me. That would be the natural reaction. I'm Robert, just an office worker in the General Affairs Department, tasked mostly with behind-the-scenes errands. No one would ever expect me to play the piano, let alone on a night like this. But as I sat down and began to play the out-of-tune piano, a faint murmuring rippled through the audience. "Who is he?" "I am a humble General Affairs staff member at Foster Corporation. My job isn't glamorous, I handle mundane tasks and behind-the-scenes work every day. When I see the coffee beans running low in the break room, I restock with a blend I know my coworkers like. If supplies are running out, I compare quotes from multiple vendors to cut costs. I'll replace the toner in the copier before it runs out and organize the file shelves with color-coded labels for easier access. Paying attention to the little things is just my way of working. My main duties involve checking numbers and terms in documents and delivering files to the right place without fail. In essence, I'm treated as the office errand boy. Still, I take pride in what I do. Even small moments, like hearing someone say, "Thank goodness this was taken care of," make me genuinely happy. It's one of the reasons I stick it out at this company. That said, some coworkers think my work is insignificant. The worst offender is Oscar from the sales department. One afternoon, as I was quietly reviewing documents at my desk by the window, I heard an exaggerated throat clearing behind me. Soft footsteps followed, and it's a bad sign. When I slowly turned around, it was Oscar from the sales department, standing there with his arms crossed. The look in his eyes seemed to say, "Well, what should I report this time?" "Hey, Robert, got a minute?" His voice was unusually high-pitched. He deliberately started speaking louder, as if making sure everyone around could hear him. As soon as I noticed her, Heather, one of the female staff nearby, awkwardly shifted her gaze between me and Oscar. "The copier was acting up earlier, wasn't it? Paper jam or something. Isn't that your fault?" The way Oscar said it made it sound like he had already decided I was to blame. But I knew for a fact that I had nothing to do with it. I hadn't even touched the copier, and, in fact, I'd never caused any trouble with it before. I haven't done anything with the copier. If I answer honestly, Oscar just scoffs again. Then, he turned to Heather. "Hey, Heather. Robert's the one who was making those documents, right? Doesn't that mean he's also responsible for the copier?" "Well, Robert usually handles the copier for us, but this is the first I've heard of any issues today." Heather's discomfort was written all over her face. She's always kind and respectful to everyone, but it was obvious she was hesitant to stick up for me. Defending me here would only make her a target for Oscar. She chose to give a vague answer, sensing the tension. See? That means Robert's basically in charge. And you can't even handle something as simple as the copier? When he confronts me as if I had committed some grave sin, a few people around glance my way. But no one tries to step in. It wasn't unusual for Oscar to hound people like this. And when I was the one on the receiving end, no one ever came to my defense. Fine. I'll go check it out. On my desk, the half-finished documents I had been working on lay scattered. I let out a small sigh and straightened the papers. Even though I knew Oscar's accusations were completely unfair, it was hard not to feel a growing frustration. Every time I was treated like the company's scapegoat, I struggled to figure out how to deal with the bitterness building inside me. I looked out at the skyline, the usual noise of the city feeling strangely distant. My irritation simmered quietly but steadily. Still, there's one person in this company who sees me for who I really am. It's Rebecca. She's the president's daughter and essentially the backbone of the company. Rebecca always wears a calm smile and treats everyone with kindness. She carries herself with grace but genuinely values each employee's contributions, no matter how small. Thanks to your consistent organization of supplies, our sales team can work more efficiently. She once said that with a warm smile to me. Hearing her words made even the smallest tasks feel meaningful. I couldn't help but admire her. I knew she was far out of my league, but that didn't stop me from watching her whenever I had the chance. Whenever I saw her bustling through the halls, I found myself wondering what new ideas she was working on. Of course, I could never admit my feelings to anyone. One quiet afternoon, while walking through the empty office to refill copier paper, I heard a faint, weary voice from the lit reception room. The door was slightly ajar. Peeking in, I saw Rebecca sitting amidst a mountain of documents, sighing deeply. Worried, I knocked gently. She looked up, startled, and gave me a tired but faint smile. Hi, Robert. Can I help you with anything? When I mustered up the courage to call out to her, she looked as though her eyes were slightly teary. Though I might have imagined it. But her exhaustion was plain to see, and it tugged at my heart. Not wanting to stand over her, I crouched down to her level to talk. The more I think about the company, the more I can't help but focus on its problems. Her voice was barely above a whisper. She explained that the company's financial situation was dire. Her father, Mr. Foster, was struggling with his health after years of overwork. And a major project aimed at rebuilding relationships with clients wasn't progressing as planned. What can I even do right now? Watching her lower her gaze, I felt an overwhelming restlessness I couldn't ignore. I didn't have any solutions. But if seeing her suffer like this hurts so much, there must be something I can do to help. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. Rebecca, who was standing across from me, had a slightly surprised look on her face. Robert, you always handle your work so thoroughly, and it makes me feel like I need to step up and give it my all too. When Rebecca said those words with a laugh, I doubted my ears for a moment. She was always so calm and kind with her smiles, but I never imagined she'd compliment me like that. Our eyes met for a second, and then she shyly lowered her gaze before continuing. Even with organizing supplies or preparing the meeting rooms, things wouldn't run so smoothly without you. You pay attention to the little things no one else notices, and that motivates me to work harder too. Hearing that made my chest feel a little warmer. Rebecca was always leading with such confidence in front of everyone, handling business matters like a pro. I never thought someone like her would appreciate the humble office works I did. Feeling a mix of embarrassment and joy, I found myself at a loss for words. Really? I'm just working behind the scenes, doing my best, that's all. I stammered, fumbling for the right words, but Rebecca gently shook her head. No, I truly appreciate it. You see, sometimes I get so caught up in my work that I can't see what's around me. But you're always calm. observing everything and filling in the gaps. That's why I feel so reassured. Seeing her smile shyly, I somehow end up feeling encouraged instead. Thank you. Hearing that really motivates me. If there's anything you need, don't hesitate to ask. I want to be even more helpful. When I said that, Rebecca's eyes seemed to grow a little teary. But then, as if to cover her embarrassment, she quietly said, "Thank you," before adjusting the documents in her arms and hurrying down the hallway. The smile she gave as she left was filled with undeniable warmth. I looked down at the documents on my desk, feeling the gentle afterglow of the moment lingering in the air. If she truly needed me, I'd do anything for her. With that thought firmly in mind, a faint sense of happiness spread from deep within me. Then, one afternoon, the office was suddenly filled with a piercing shriek. Startled, I looked up to see even the usually composed women in the administration department whispering excitedly near the entrance. "Someone really important is here." I heard Rebecca went all the way to the reception room to greet them. They chattered. Curiosity got the better of me, and I found myself looking toward the entrance. One by one, familiar people in suits entered the building, and then, at the end, a man appeared with an aura that seemed to command the room like the lead actor stepping onto an opera stage. As he walked further in, he reached the end of the hallway where Rebecca stood, taking her hand lightly and exchanging polite greetings. His calm smile and graceful bow gave him an air of elegance that made my chest feel uncomfortably tight. When his gaze turned toward Rebecca, she returned it with a faint, slightly uneasy smile. The man's expression, however, exuded confidence, as if to declare, "I'm here for someone important." It didn't take long to realize that he was the reason for all the commotion. "That guy's name is Ryan Harrington." Before I knew it, Oscar was standing behind me, grinning near my ear. Apparently, he's the second son of the Harrington Group. You know, the conglomerate with businesses spanning finance to fashion under its belt. Oscar said, lowering his voice but failing to hide his excitement. Then, as if to mock me, he added, "Not only is he the son of a CEO, but he's also a famous pianist. And get this, there's a rumor he's dating Rebecca. Or maybe it's more of a political connection. Either way, someone like you could never compete with a guy like him." His last comment hit me like a dull ache in my chest. It was true, someone like him seemed to live in an entirely different world than I did. Elegant, glamorous, and the kind of man who would look perfect standing beside Rebecca. Suppressing the bitter feelings welling up inside, I adjusted the documents in my arms and walked away. It was late in the evening after work. After finishing my usual chores, I was about to leave the office when, out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of Rebecca. She was standing alone at the end of the hallway, staring at her phone as if lost in thought. It was unusual to see her like that, and I couldn't help but wonder what was going on. "Oh, Robert, you're still here," she said, her voice soft with relief as she noticed me. Apparently, she'd worked late preparing urgent documents, and with the company car unavailable, she couldn't drive herself home. But when she stepped outside, it had started raining unexpectedly, and she hadn't been able to catch a cab either. "Would you like me to walk with you to the station? I'm heading home now anyway." When I made this bold suggestion, she hesitated for a moment, her expression slightly uncertain, but soon returned a soft smile. "Then, I'll take you up on your offer," she said shyly as she moved closer. Stepping out into the night, the rain was much heavier than I expected, pounding relentlessly between the buildings. I opened my folding umbrella, angling it carefully to shield her from getting wet as much as possible. "By the way," I began, as if I had just remembered something. "About Ryan, the guy who came to our office the other day, are you and he close?" "Ryan." She gave a faint, wry smile at my question. As we walked down the dark, rain-soaked street, she hesitated briefly before speaking. "The Harrington Group is one of my father's company's business partners. Our families have been connected for years. So I've known him since we were kids. That's why he's so casual with me. But honestly, I'm not very comfortable with him. Her voice carried a genuine undertone of struggle. It surprised me that someone like her would feel uneasy about a flashy personality like his. But right now, my family's company is in a tough spot. My father wants to strengthen ties with the Harrington Group, so whenever Ryan visits, I'm expected to host him warmly. And honestly, he might be able to help us with some deals. At that, she exhaled quietly, her eyes fixed on the rain ahead. Then, looking down, she continued. To be honest, I'm not too enthusiastic about it. I know it's what my father wants, and I know how important the company is. But if it ever comes to strengthening ties through something like marriage, I don't think I could accept that. It must have been rare for her to share such candid thoughts. I nodded, trying to empathize with her feelings as much as I could. Of course, you'd feel that way. That's completely unfair. Using marriage as some kind of business tool? I'd be against it too. When I firmly said so, her eyes widened slightly in surprise. But her expression also seemed quietly happy. Robert, thank you. I might be a bad daughter for saying this, but I just can't come to terms with it. I don't want my life decisions to be solely for the company's sake. Amid the unusually loud sound of the rain, our shared umbrella created a small, intimate space. The air within felt damp yet carried an inexplicably comforting warmth. After a few moments of silence, she gave a shy smile. As we continued toward the station, a familiar figure caught my eye. Standing in a quiet alley, holding a convenience store bag, was a man with his back turned to us. Is that my brother? The words slipped out before I could stop myself. The man turned around at the sound of my voice. There was no mistake. Unlike me, dressed in my suit, he wore a casual shirt and jacket. It was unmistakably my older brother, Kevin. Oh, Robert. Long time no see, he said, raising his hand casually as he approached. Despite his graceful mannerisms being the same as always, his eyes still carried that familiar air of self-assuredness. When he noticed Rebecca standing beside me, his eyes narrowed in curiosity. And who's this lovely lady? Walking home together, huh? Wow, I never thought someone like you could manage an umbrella date with someone so elegant. You've come a long way from being the useless office worker. With a teasing smile, he added a playful tone to his words. I reluctantly tensed up a little. I didn't want Rebecca to be looked at in a strange way, and more importantly, my relationship with my brother had never been good. You don't have to say it like that. Before I could finish, Rebecca spoke up in a calm yet resolute tone. Robert is very dependable. His work in the office is critical to the company, and he's always been a great help to me. Her firm words made my brother's eyes widen slightly in surprise. He probably hadn't expected someone to defend me like that. He looked away, letting out a small huff through his nose. Okay. Well, whatever. With that, my brother disappeared into the rainy night. Rebecca and I stood there for a while, watching his retreating figure. As he faded from sight, Rebecca turned to me with a curious expression and asked, Was that really your brother? He seems different from you in terms of atmosphere. I let out a small laugh and nodded. Yeah, that's my brother, Kevin. He's always been like that, logical to a fault, maybe even a little sharp-tongued. He's a music teacher at a prestigious school. He's always had a knack for music, and he stood out a lot back in school. Robert, you're just as wonderful. The sudden words made my heart leap. She raised her voice just enough to be heard over the downpour, a shy smile appearing on her face. You may not have a glamorous job like your brother, but you take joy in supporting others. I've been encouraged so many times by that about you. Her straightforward gaze as she said those words made my chest tighten with warmth. The encounter with my brother had made me feel small in comparison for a moment, but her words melted those feelings away. Rebecca, just hearing you say that is more than enough to make me feel fulfilled. It makes me want to work even harder. Under the curtain of heavy rain, we stood a little closer to each other, quietly exchanging words that carried weight. Warmth spread through me, making even the cold rain feel strangely pleasant. A few days later, in the morning, an impromptu meeting was about to begin in the office. The attendees included key members from the sales and administrative departments, along with Rebecca, who was acting as a representative for her father. Standing at the front of the room, Rebecca had a slightly stiff expression. Beside her stood Ryan, his confident presence commanding attention. The meeting's agenda revolved around a proposal he had brought to the table. It seemed that, in addition to being the heir to a powerful business group, Ryan was also a celebrated pianist. His proposal was to organize a grand piano concert with him as the main performer, aiming to showcase the strong partnership between Foster Trading and the Harrington Group to external audiences. As you all know, our company is still in a difficult financial position. Ryan has made a proposal to help us. Rebecca began, her voice steady but her expression tense. Ryan smoothly distributed printed materials to the attendees. The documents outlined a detailed plan for the concert, which would feature prominent classical musicians and invite important clients and partners to create a grand spectacle, boosting Foster Trading's public image. The main event will be my piano performance. Some of the biggest names in classical music will also be involved, and there's a high chance the media will cover it. I believe this will be an excellent way to improve the company's reputation. As he spoke, many of the employees exchanged uncertain glances. When he plays the piano, he apparently exudes an aura like that of a leading star on stage. On the other hand, there was an atmosphere of uncertainty among everyone, as if they were questioning whether concerts for intercompany bonding really had any effect. After a moment of hesitation, Rebecca spoke up, her calm voice addressing the room. I'd like to hear your honest opinions. To be frank, I feel this approach might be superficial. While it's important to attract attention and improve our company's image, I'm concerned that without addressing deeper issues within the company, such as delays in product development and the restructuring of our sales routes, this might not have a lasting impact, she said, her fingers gripping the corner of the documents tightly. This is because Foster Trading currently faces numerous challenges, such as delays in product development and the need to rebuild its sales routes. While the concert is dazzling, there's a high risk it will end up being nothing more than a temporary spectacle. At the same time, missing an opportunity like this could lead to further decline. I could sense the irritation reflected in Rebecca's expression. It was then that Oscar raised his voice confidently. I'm in favor. Sure, it might be a temporary fix, but right now, Foster Trading needs effective promotion. Even if it fails, it's better than doing nothing and continuing to decline. Strengthening ties with the Harrington Group could open up more opportunities in the future. Surprisingly, his points were logical. In fact, gaining attention is one of the fundamental principles of business. Gradually, his powerful way of speaking and passion began to sway the employees toward agreement. Some of the initial skeptics hesitantly voiced their support, acknowledging the potential for significant publicity. Rebecca's expression remained clouded, but ultimately, the decision was made to move forward with the concert. Later, as preparations for the concert kicked into high gear in a corner of the office, I mustered my courage and approached Rebecca. Rebecca, are you really okay with this? Everyone seems excited, but you didn't seem convinced. She looked up slowly from the proposal she had been staring at. Her fingers gripped the papers more tightly than usual. Yeah. To be honest, I'm not thrilled about it. But the company needs funding to stay afloat. And we need to strengthen our relationships with key partners. I don't have the same decisive management skills as my father. So I'm just trying to figure out what I can do. Her eyes held a deep determination to protect the company. It was a stark contrast to the image of her as a poised and elegant heiress. Here stood someone fighting against overwhelming challenges. I can't let the employees lose their livelihoods. that pressure is always there. So, even if it's a temporary fix, if it's presented as an opportunity, I can't afford to let it slip by." Her voice trailed off, almost as if she were convincing herself. Hearing her words, spoken with such vulnerability, made my chest tighten with emotion. If Rebecca had made her decision, then I wanted to give her my full support. That thought resonated deeply within me. In that case, I'll do everything I can to help. It might just be an extension of my usual tasks, but I'll handle anything that needs to be done. When I said that, Rebecca blinked in surprise for a moment, then returned a gentle smile. "Thank you, Robert. Knowing you're here gives me the strength to keep going." The next moment, she gathered her documents and quickly set off, her movements brisk and purposeful. I stood up and followed her lead, ready to do my part. This concert might still be a makeshift solution, but if it could serve as a beacon of hope for the company, there was plenty of work to be done behind the scenes. And if it meant paving a path that could save Rebecca, I wanted to see it through to the very end. As the day of the concert approached, a sense of excitement began to fill not only Foster Trading's office but also the nearby hall. The venue chosen was a historic concert hall, one of the most renowned in the city. It's a place where prestigious orchestras usually perform. On the day of the event, the venue buzzed with activity. Staff unloaded Ryan's grand piano and tuning specialists carefully inspected and adjusted it. Surrounding Ryan was a crowd of assistants, managers, and even media personnel, the energy unmistakably signaling the start of a grand show. Meanwhile, my colleagues from the administrative department and I were busy ushering in guests and making final checks on the hall decorations. Rebecca was stationed at the entrance, greeting visitors with her usual grace, doing her best to keep smiling despite the pressure. As the dim lights of the hall began to focus on the stage, the staff worked feverishly. They adjusted the piano bench, tested the microphones, and triple-checked the programs and invitations. "Ryan is really a celebrity, isn't he? I heard a TV crew is here to cover the event. If this goes well, Foster Trading might actually make a comeback." Despite the hopeful buzz, I couldn't shake my unease. Events like these, as dazzling as they were, came with high stakes. A single misstep could ruin everything. Was Rebecca truly okay with all of this? The tension escalated backstage as the rehearsal began. Ryan appeared, wearing a tailored tuxedo befitting the occasion. His usual air of refinement now carried an added gravitas, befitting the main performer of the night. All eyes were on him as he ascended the stage and took his seat at the grand piano. The hall fell silent, the audience and staff alike holding their breath in anticipation. But the moment he touched the keys, a discordant sound rang out, a jarring, muddled tone that reverberated unpleasantly through the hall. The harsh sound left everyone wide-eyed in shock. It was as if several strings were out of tune, creating an unsettling, dissonant resonance. Ryan paused for a moment, frowning. Even when he pressed the keys again, the pitch was slightly off, and the chords didn't resonate properly. "What is this? What happened to the tuning?" His voice tinged with anger. Staff and tuning specialists rushed to the stage, but Ryan rose abruptly, brushing them off with a sharp wave of his hand. "I can't play on a piano in this state. The more I play, the worse it'll reflect on me. I'm leaving." The moment Ryan spat out those words, the surrounding staff held their breath. Murmurs rippled through the audience near the stage, and a heavy tension gripped the air. It was just a rehearsal, but still, it was the day of the event. If the main performer disappeared at this critical moment, right before the show was about to start, it would be nothing short of a disaster. "Wait, Ryan, please." Rebecca hurriedly ran over and grabbed his arm. Her eyes were filled with worry, and her voice trembled slightly. It was only natural. The concert they had worked so hard to prepare for would be ruined if things continued like this. "We'll call the tuning specialist right away. Please, just give us a little more time. None of us want the concert to proceed like this. We'll fix it. I promise." So please. Despite her heartfelt plea, Ryan pulled his arm away with an air of finality. Normally graceful and composed, he now wore a harsh, intimidating expression, his gaze sweeping over everyone disdainfully. Tuning takes time, doesn't it? After all the publicity for this event, it's my reputation that's on the line if this piano isn't perfect. I'm sorry, but I'm withdrawing. I have a brand image to uphold. As he said that and turned on his heel, an unmistakable sense of anger and pride radiated from him. His entourage of staff and managers quickly followed suit, moving to keep up with him. In no time, the disastrous reality of the main pianist leaving was beginning to set in. "Ryan, please, we can't let it end like this," Rebecca called out desperately, her voice trembling. "If you leave, this entire concert will lose its meaning. It's not just the company, many of the guests came here specifically to hear you play." But he didn't stop. He continued walking, his back still turned to her. Ahead of him, a few audience members holding opera glasses glanced in their direction with concern. Uneasy murmurs began to ripple through the venue, and it was clear that within minutes, chaos would erupt. "I've had enough. I said I'm leaving, and I meant it. I came here to help you out because you seem to need it, but this is the thanks I get? That's not it at all. We didn't want this trouble either. If we could just get the piano tuned quickly." Tuned quickly? You don't even know if it's possible, do you? If my performance is ruined, it's not just the concert, it's my reputation on the line. You're the one who asked me to come here. If that's the case, then take responsibility for it. Ryan's sharp gaze bore into Rebecca, who visibly trembled under its weight. Her shoulders quivered, reflecting the pain of his words. "I know we're at fault, but could you please cooperate, just a little longer? I can't let this concert fail. I need this to succeed." Cooperate? Don't misunderstand, Rebecca. I was only here as a favor. I never intended to sacrifice myself for you, or your company. With that, he brushed past the curtain at the side of the stage and strode off. The chilling echo of his footsteps filled the quiet backstage area, growing fainter until they disappeared entirely. Left behind were Rebecca, overwhelmed with despair, and the staff, paralyzed by uncertainty. Meanwhile, the audience, already seated in anticipation, began to grow restless. From somewhere, a dissatisfied voice rose above the murmurs. "Why hasn't it started yet?" The air in the room thickened as everyone stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. Near the dressing room, I watched the chaos unfold, clenching my fists tightly. Even in this situation, I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. "I'll play." When I said that, the staff and employees around me stared in astonishment. "What are you saying, Robert? You've never performed on stage in your life. The piano isn't even properly tuned. Stop joking around." Laughter and confusion erupted around me, the staff's skepticism cutting deep. It was a natural reaction. But amidst the noise, only Rebecca looked at me with a serious expression. Her eyes were a mix of anxiety and a faint glimmer of hope. "Robert, can you really do it?" Her voice shook as she spoke, but her gaze stayed locked on mine. I swallowed hard and gave her a shaky smile. "I can't guarantee anything, but if no one else can step up, then I have to. Please, let me try." I was hurried onto the stage by the staff. The audience was already full. Every seat occupied by guests eagerly awaiting the performance. Of course, they all expected the main pianist to appear, not a no-name office worker like me. "Ladies and gentlemen, we sincerely apologize for the delay. Due to unforeseen circumstances, there has been a sudden change in the performer for tonight's concert." The female staff member acting as the host explained apologetically. The murmurs grew louder, a wave of disappointment sweeping through the room. Many faces clearly showed their frustration. My heart pounded like it would burst, but I took a deep breath and sat down at the piano. As my fingers brushed the keys, the faint memory of the discordant notes from earlier echoed in my ears. Would this really work? If the tuning was as flawed as Ryan claimed, then I had no choice but to adapt to the imperfection and make the best of it. Testing the keys, I played a few chords. A muffled sound echoed through the venue, causing a stir among the audience. The employees and business partners watching from the wings wore expressions of palpable anxiety, their eyes fixed on me like daggers. With their stares boring into my back, I placed my hands on the keys once again. All right, here we go. Murmuring softly, I pressed a chord once and listened closely to the slight distortion. Instantly, I mapped out in my head how I could adjust my playing to compensate for the misalignment. The audience's tension still hung heavy in the air, but I had no doubts anymore. The first few notes, a faint hint of distortion remained. But that was within expectations. Then, as if shaking off the rough edges, my right hand wove the melody smoothly while my left hand provided a soft, supportive harmony. The unease in the room began to dissipate, the murmurs fading into silence. The jagged outlines of the flawed notes began to blend seamlessly as though drawing a deep breath. One by one, the audience fell into an odd stillness, their initial skepticism giving way to a hesitant calm. No one uttered a word anymore. Those who had been wondering how the piece could possibly come together, given the major handicap of the piano's poor tuning, gradually found themselves drawn into the soothing melody. As I focused on guiding the sound rather than merely playing the notes, the difficulty of the task seemed to melt away. When the final phrase dissolved into the air, a moment of silence fell over the hall. It lasted just long enough for anticipation to build before a thunderous applause erupted, filling the room. The sound of cheers and clapping was overwhelming, almost as if the audience had been struck by an unexpected and deeply moving conclusion. That was incredible. Even with the out-of-tuned piano, it sounded so beautiful. Applause and murmurs of astonishment swept through the crowd like a wave. My heart was pounding wildly as I bowed deeply, my hands trembling now that the performance was over. When I raised my eyes, I caught sight of Rebecca in the corner of the hall, her eyes glistening with tears as she smiled and clapped. The few minutes on stage had felt like an eternity, and now, as I began to feel the tremors in my hands, I found myself inhaling deeply, trying to calm my racing pulse. For a fleeting moment, I had stood at the center of the stage, no longer just an office worker. A profound sense of accomplishment swelled within me, unlike anything I had ever felt before. As the applause and excitement continued to swirl through the hall, I was surrounded backstage by a wave of employees and staff. Robert! Who are you, really? How did you manage to pull off a performance like that? The piano was so out of tune. Voices filled with a mixture of bewilderment and exhilaration bombarded me. Everyone around me wore expressions of disbelief, their amazement written clearly on their faces. Among them were Oscar and my colleagues from the administration department, all staring at me as if they were seeing a different person entirely. Well. You all seem to be having a good time. Ryan strode toward us, his footsteps echoing sharply against the floor. He had discarded his tuxedo jacket and changed into a plain suit. Although his face was still set in a scowl, there was a faint, mocking gleam in his eyes. You were all saying you couldn't play earlier, and now look at you. Someone murmured, but their comment was met with a sharp scoff from Ryan. His gaze locked onto me, as though he were sizing me up, quietly spoke out. I never expected to be upstaged like this. So, tell me. Who are you, really? His question hung in the air, and I felt a lump form in my throat. The grace and charm he had displayed earlier as a world-class pianist were gone, replaced by a frigid intensity that seemed to freeze the room. His lips curled into a sneer, his pride as an artist clearly bruised, his eyes brimming with disdain. I'm Robert Andrews, an office worker at Foster Corporation. At that moment, a slight twitch appeared on Ryan's brow. As if something had come to mind, he twisted the corner of his lips. Andrews, you say? He darted his eyes around for a brief moment and let out a chilling, knowing chuckle. So, you're that guy's brother, are you? In the tense silence, the word "that guy" echoed with an unusually heavy weight. To think it's that his useless little brother. The fool who made a complete mess of things during the concert. Ryan sneered, his eyes now gleaming with unmistakable contempt as they bore into me. It was painfully obvious who Ryan meant by the fool. Unwanted memories came flooding back from the depths of my mind. From the moment my brother and I could walk, we'd been attending the same piano lessons. Though my brother always outperformed me academically, when it came to the piano, I was often the one receiving higher praise. This dynamic fueled a rivalry between us. My brother, unwilling to be bested, threw himself into practice with unmatched determination, while I clung to music as my one true strength. Together, we spurred each other forward, always striving to surpass the other. The turning point for us came when we were both invited to perform in a prestigious recital. A major sponsor was expected to attend, and the stakes were clear: impress them. And it could open doors to studying abroad and even greater opportunities. For my brother, it was the chance of a lifetime. I, too, was slated to perform, but all eyes were on him. Everyone, including our family, saw it as his moment to shine. And he himself believed this was finally his chance to surpass me. But right before the performance, disaster struck. The piano on stage was discovered to be out of tune. During rehearsal, it had sounded fine, but now the notes were muddy. And the pedals weren't responding properly. The irregularities were so pronounced that suspicion arose. It seemed someone had tampered with the piano deliberately. For reasons I couldn't comprehend, fingers immediately pointed at me. He was the last one to touch the piano, someone said. And the blame snowballed from there. Of course, I denied it. I would never sabotage my own brother, let alone something so important. But the adults were already convinced, whispering among themselves that I had acted out of jealousy. He must have wanted to bring his brother down, they said. No matter how much I protested, my words fell on deaf ears. In the end, my brother had to perform on the malfunctioning piano. It was a disaster. The sponsor, unimpressed, dismissed his performance as lacking skill. My brother was devastated, muttering, "It was such a great opportunity." Though he never outright said it was my fault. The look on his face made it clear something had broken inside him. Seeing that, our family and those around us began to believe, in the end. The younger brother's mistake cost the elder brother everything, and a heavy, dark atmosphere began to loom over us. From that day forward, my brother gradually drifted away from the path of being a pianist. The adults, seeing his academic potential, encouraged him to choose a more stable career. My brother, perhaps swayed by their words, eventually let go of music. As for me, I began to be distanced by those around me, labeled as the brother who ruined the elder brother's future. It all felt so unfair. Sometime later, I overheard a rumor that there might be another person responsible for tampering with the piano's tuning that day. But without any solid proof, the truth remained elusive, and in the end, even our futures as brothers were irreparably twisted. As long as the memory of that stage lingers, the wounds tied to the piano for both of us don't seem like they'll heal anytime soon. Clenching my teeth tightly, I sank into the bitter memories of the past. The look of resignation in my brother's eyes as I saw him for the last time. His slumped shoulders as he walked away, abandoned by his sponsors and overtaken by despair. He had convinced himself that the derailment of his life was entirely his own fault. Just recalling his figure is enough to make my chest tighten, leaving me breathless with overwhelming regret and anger. But suddenly, I was pulled back to the present by the sound of a loud, mocking laugh. Lifting my head, I saw Ryan standing there, his lips curled into a cruel smirk. "What's wrong? Don't tell me you're thinking about that time. You two were such a pair of promising brothers, weren't you? The genius brothers, everyone called you. And yet, both of you fell so spectacularly to the bottom. It was quite the spectacle, really." He sneered, clapping his hands as though recalling an amusing anecdote. His voice echoed coldly in the quiet corner of the hall. You see, back then, my family had ties to one of the sponsors attending that recital. They were supposed to recommend me for study abroad, to invest in my future. My father and his associates had everything lined up perfectly. But then you two came along. And suddenly the sponsor was interested in those talented brothers. They said, if they perform well, we might support them instead. With an exaggerated shrug, Ryan twisted his lips in boredom. In front of him, Rebecca and the surrounding employees held their breath, frozen in place. He seemed to be enjoying even their tense stares. So, what could we do? We greased a few palms, tampered with the tuning, bribed some staff. It wasn't difficult to rig the piano just enough to trip you both up. And then, of course, I made sure all eyes were on you when the blame came down. You were the last one near the piano, weren't you? It was too easy. All it took was planting the seed of suspicion. And the rest unfolded perfectly. With a gleeful smirk, Ryan lifted the corner of his mouth and took a quiet step toward me. His attitude was blatantly condescending, and his eyes glimmered with a dark, sinister light. Ah, what a relief! With that thorn in my side out of the way, I can finally look ahead to the next stage. At least, back then, I could. You guys' little tragedy? To me, it was nothing more than a stepping stone. His low voice carried a mocking tone as it echoed through the air. I clenched my fists tightly, unable to find any words. No matter how many times I think back to it, the frustration overwhelms me, and my lips tremble with anger. My brother's dreams and even my own future were shattered by this man. As the thought struck me, my chest burned so intensely that I could hardly breathe. Ryan! Overcome with surging anger, I instinctively clenched my fists. Everything I had been holding back threatened to burst out all at once. Before anyone could stop me, I took a step toward Ryan. But Ryan calmly raised a hand, signaling me to stop with a thin, mocking smile. Don't do it. If you hit me here, you'll be nothing but a thug. Do you have any idea what'll happen if you cause an assault case here? You only have one option. His derisive tone froze me in place. I bit down hard, teeth grinding in frustration. Think about it. If you escalate things to violence, this company's funding won't even be up for discussion anymore. Your position will crumble too. Are you really going to throw away the talent you've worked so hard for? His sneering face now bore none of the elegance of the pianist he had appeared to be. I won't let him manipulate us like this. A strong voice cut through the chaos. It was Rebecca. With a determined expression, she moved to step between me and Ryan. This is nothing but intimidation. I trusted you to help save this company, but this is unforgivable. Her bold declaration stirred murmurs of agreement from some of the employees nearby. But Ryan dismissed her completely, sparing her only a scornful glance and a scoff. Stay out of this, a sheltered girl. Here's the truth, I always intended to buy out Foster Corporation. Offering a little support was just a smokescreen before shutting you down completely. But then you showed up and threw my plans off track. Who would have thought you'd play the piano like that and disrupt everything? He chuckled, smug and unbothered, as he continued. But I've changed my approach. With you, there's more profit to be had. Destroying this company isn't as entertaining as using you. So, here's the deal, if you agree to be my pawn, I'll continue funding this company. If you refuse, I'll crush it under the weight of its debts. Ryan's piercing gaze bore down on me as he issued his vile ultimatum. The employees fell silent, and Rebecca's face clouded with distress. Accepting his terms might save the company. But it would mean being at his mercy. My fists clenched tighter as I searched for words amidst my seething anger and inner turmoil. Ryan's triumphant smirk felt suffocating, his gaze pressing down like a weight on my shoulders. What should I do? What can I possibly choose in a situation like this? Just then, hurried footsteps echoed from outside the hall. The crowd parted, and stepping into view was a man in a dark suit, none other than my brother, Kevin. Unable to hide my surprise, I let out a gasp as my brother approached with a bitter expression. The tightly pressed line of his lips conveyed an unmistakable sense of determination. "Sorry, Robert. It took longer than I thought. I've been tracking this guy for a while now. He put up plenty of roadblocks, but I finally made it." My brother's words cut through the tense air, holding everyone's attention. He fixed a piercing gaze on Ryan, raising a small file in his hand. Ryan snorted dismissively, squaring his shoulders with arrogant confidence. "And what's that? A file? You think you've got evidence?" "That's right, evidence of your deliberate tuning sabotage. You've been tampering with pianos to derail your rivals, timing it perfectly to ruin their chances. I've also secured testimony from your accomplices. You may not know this, but records of your past crimes have been preserved." After saying that, my brother raised the file with a forceful gesture, as if slamming it in the air. It seemed to contain multiple reports and email exchanges. For the first time, Ryan's expression stiffened, just slightly. "Is this supposed to corner me? Don't make me laugh. Documents and data like that are nothing. With my resources and connections, I can bury all of it in no time. You lot are nothing but ants. Even if you make noise, it won't amount to anything. I'll just use my top-tier lawyers and crush you through the courts. You can't win against me." His words carried the distinct confidence and dark arrogance of someone who had wielded money and power for far too long. On the flip side, it might also mean that Ryan, cornered at this point, was desperately trying to fight back. At that moment, an unexpected figure stepped forward. It was Oscar, his face taut with determination. "I have more evidence." Pulling out his phone, he swiped across the screen and opened a file. On the display were rows of data and files, all meticulously listed. "This is just a portion of the information I gathered inside and outside the company. When I was communicating with Ryan under the pretense of progress reports, I noticed some messages hinting at suspicious money flows. At first, I pretended not to notice, but eventually, it was too much to ignore." As Oscar scrolled through the screen, a series of unnatural entries appeared, labeled as payments to specific staff members or maintenance costs for equipment. The amounts and timing were inconsistent with standard operations by any stretch of the imagination. No way. This was processed in a way that it wouldn't appear in the company's official accounting records. When I dug into the expense reimbursement process, I found that names were being shifted to other departments or covered with receipts under different aliases. It's what you'd call creative accounting. There were small, irregular expenses here and there, just enough to avoid drawing attention. And every time such an expense occurred, there was some trouble at a concert or performance. As the surrounding employees watched in tense silence, Oscar continued. "Ryan, I knew you were trying to use me. That talk about helping Rebecca climb the ranks so I could secure a promotion? I always thought it was just lip service. Still, I cooperated because I believed it was for her benefit." Oscar glanced briefly in my direction, biting his lip in frustration. I never imagined Robert had his life ruined in such a vile way in the past. The more I heard, the more disgusted I became. No matter what excuses you have, what you did is unforgivable. Sure, I thought Robert was a quiet, unremarkable guy. But this guy, he's been holding this company together from behind the scenes. You can mock him all you want, but there's no justification for taking his life away from him. That's why, Ryan, I can't side with you anymore." Oscar glared at Ryan. For a moment, Ryan seemed to falter under his piercing gaze. "Ha! How amusing, weaklings banding together. It's laughable. You'd never understand. I was born as the president's son. But because I was the second son, no matter how competent I was, my father never acknowledged me. I had to carve out my worth on my own. Ryan spat out the words bitterly as he stared at the incriminating files. Perhaps overwhelmed by emotions he had kept buried, his voice trembled with frustration and desperation. As the tension in the room mounted, my brother quietly shook his head. Even if your parents never recognized you, this isn't the right way to handle it. Trampling on someone else's life to prove your worth, does that really lead to the future you wanted? My brother's calm, steady question made Ryan open his mouth to respond. But before he could, my brother continued. Still, there's one thing I'm grateful to you for. Your wrongdoings may have taken a lot from us. But my younger brother didn't let your interference crush him. He grew stronger and let his talents shine. That's one thing you couldn't take away from him. At those words, a flicker of something crossed Ryan's eyes. The entourage that had been standing by his side had already lost their nerve. None of them made any move to defend him. Ryan was escorted out by the staff. Once the commotion had settled, my brother turned to me. I have to say, I was surprised. I never imagined you could overcome that tuning error and play so well. There was a faint tone of admiration in his voice. I lowered my eyebrows and gave a shy smile. I wanted to show you. I swore to myself that I'd never let something like that tragedy happen again, so I practiced nonstop. Hearing this, my brother widened his eyes slightly, as though he'd caught his breath, then spoke in a faintly trembling voice. You did it, for me? Of course I did. You've been my inspiration ever since I started playing the piano. I always wanted to play like you. That's why, when you failed, I couldn't do anything to help. I hated myself for it. I promised myself I'd never feel that way again. My brother listened, swallowing my words, and then quietly lowered his gaze, tears welling in his eyes. I was wrong. Back then, I was so consumed by my own pain that I made you suffer too. Thank you, and I'm sorry. His voice quivered slightly as he placed his hand on my shoulder. I shrugged slightly and shook my head awkwardly. You don't have to apologize. I'm the one who's sorry for not being able to do anything while you were struggling. But now, I feel like we can finally move forward. Ryan's matter is settled. Maybe one day, we can play the piano together again. Hearing my response, my brother nodded slightly, wiping the tears from his eyes. Sunlight streamed in from outside the hall, casting a soft glow across the stage. The grudges of the past and the shattered dreams seemed to begin to heal in that moment. Not long after, I started hearing more about the aftermath of the Harrington family. The incident, Ryan's involvement in fraud in his attempt to sabotage Foster Corporation's concerts, had become a hot topic in the industry. After all, it was a scandal involving a young pianist and the second son of a prestigious group. The media swarmed the story, and business partners were quick to react. The group's chairman, who was Ryan's father, seemed to be scrambling to do damage control, according to rumors. In fact, evidence of Ryan sabotaging rival companies and individual performers continued to surface, leading to calls for accountability among the group's executives who had turned a blind eye. Serves them right. One day during lunch, as I sipped my coffee in the office break room, Oscar approached with those words. Did you hear about the deeper issues in the Harrington family? No, not really. I don't have much information. My brother's been digging into it here and there, though. Hearing my response, Oscar furrowed his brows and added, I've heard there's a fierce power struggle within the Harrington group. It's not just Ryan, even his father is scrambling over succession plans and how to share power. Ryan probably suffered from the frustrations of being a second son, resorting to twisted methods to assert his presence. Thinking about his background, I can't say I feel absolutely no sympathy for him. But the damage he inflicted on my life and my brother's is far too grave to overlook. Sure, a part of me feels a sense of serves him right, but if Ryan's story ends with him being socially erased, I can't help but feel unsettled. Deep down, I think there's a small, naive hope that someday he'll reflect on his actions and find a way to redeem himself. Well, after trampling on so many people's dreams like that, he's bound to pay the price somewhere. Oscar said as he downed the last of his coffee. Then, looking slightly uncomfortable, he spoke again. Hey, Robert, look, I'm sorry. For everything. I've always had this strong desire to stand out. I wanted to climb the ranks through sales performance, get promoted quickly, and earn Rebecca's recognition. That's why I jumped at any opportunity. And honestly, I thought of you, this quiet, unassuming office worker, as an obstacle. It felt like you were taking away the stage I wanted to shine on by working behind the scenes. Oscar let out a bitter laugh and continued. But as I worked near you, I started realizing that what I thought was unremarkable was actually the most important. You were the one preparing everything to make sure everyone else could work smoothly. And yet, I dismissed it all as if it were just a given. I looked down on it. I'm sorry. It's pathetic, I know. But I do appreciate it. I hope I helped even a little this time. His eyes reflected a mix of regret and a hint of relief. His honesty, so unlike anything I'd seen from him before, made my chest tighten. Thanks, Oscar. Because of you, we're making progress in resolving Ryan's fraud and clearing the false charges against me and my brother. Honestly, I never expected you'd go that far for us. When I said that, Oscar sniffled slightly, looking embarrassed. The usual sarcastic grin was gone, replaced by a faint, relieved smile. Over the following weeks, the situation transformed in unexpected ways. Foster Corporation received hundreds of inquiries. The media labeled me as the mysterious office worker who played the detuned piano, and the footage spread widely, further fueling the attention. Despite the short performance, it apparently garnered a response far beyond expectations. Naturally, the exposure of Ryan's fraudulent activities became another major topic. This prompted Foster Corporation to nullify its unfair contracts with the Harrington Group and begin seeking new partner companies. As a result, companies that had previously hesitated due to the Harrington Group's influence started expressing interest in re-establishing business ties, leading to surprising new opportunities. It's almost ironic. We've had more interest from companies now that Harrington's gone. As she said that, Heather from the General Affairs Department smiled cheerfully. Meanwhile, Rebecca, now leading the company, had been busier than ever, pushing forward new proposals and re-evaluating personnel placements. As for me, I continued to handle my usual administrative tasks, but I'd also started receiving numerous requests to perform at small concerts, either on weekends or after work. The changes were nothing short of astonishing. Robert, have you ever thought about pursuing a career as a full-time pianist? I was asked often, and each time, I found myself at a loss. I loved performing, and part of me wanted to feel that immense sense of accomplishment from the stage again. But for now, my place here still felt too important to let go. One evening, as I stayed late at work, I found myself alone in the office with Rebecca, who was sorting through some documents. Out of nowhere, she spoke. Robert, if you ever truly decide you want to pursue music, don't hesitate to say so. You can leave the company if you need to. I understood that her offer came from a place of kindness. She wanted me to soar toward my dreams without feeling held back. But that's precisely why I shook my head immediately. Where I am today is because of my time here at Foster Corporation, and because you always told me you needed me. That's why I've worked so hard. I have no intention of leaving this place so easily. Hearing this, Rebecca let out a genuinely relieved smile. Her expression seemed to ease some of the pressure she'd been carrying, and it warmed my heart. Sure, performing piano is tempting, but I enjoy knowing that even doing the most mundane tasks here makes a difference. Being behind the scenes may not be glamorous, but it's an essential role. Robert, I really admire you. To take pride in supporting others, even without the spotlight, it's something not everyone can do. Our eyes met briefly, and a warmth spread through my chest. Even though we still had paperwork to finish, in that moment, her presence felt far more important than the tasks at hand. Feeling a bit embarrassed, I continued. I've always been inspired by how you never give up and always face forward, no matter the circumstances. You're the daughter of a powerful company. Yet you care so deeply for every single employee. Because you believed in me, I found my place here. If you hadn't trusted me, I don't think I would have had the courage to play the piano. So from now on, I want to support you and help make this company one where you can always smile. The road to rebuilding it might still be long, but I'll do everything I can to help. As I said this, a faint tear shimmered in Rebecca's eye. She took a step closer and, in a gentle voice, whispered, "As long as you're here with me, I'll be okay. Even if things get tough, as long as you're there to lend a hand." Our eyes met as she lifted her gaze. Under the dim office lighting, we stared at each other in silence, as if trying to confirm the unspoken thoughts we shared. From afar, the faint hum of the city's nightlife echoed, but it felt as though we were trapped in a world of our own. Even when faced with hardships and injustice, if you lean on your companions and loved ones while pressing forward, unexpected talents and new possibilities can emerge. Roles that seem insignificant or tasks that appear small can create profound value when approached with sincerity. Even past wounds and failures can become a source of renewal when shared and understood, leading to deeper bonds. In the end, it's through compassion and trust in others that we find the strength to continue carving out our paths, no matter the struggles we endure. If you can solve this, you can do whatever you want with me. For some reason, during a $1 million business negotiation, Amber, the beautiful daughter of the company's president, suddenly threw a tricky question at me. I already solved it. What? You're actually right. At that moment, Amber flashed a mysterious smile. This is the story of how a 40-year-old middle-aged company employee's life takes a sudden turn. How many years has it been since I last came back to the city? My name is Kevin, and I've been working for 20 years now. Ever since I graduated from middle school and moved to the countryside where my mother's family lived, I had stayed away from this city. I had gone abroad for university and other things, but I never imagined I'd be back here at this point in my life. Now, I stand once again in the heart of this vast metropolis. Looking up, I see towering skyscrapers stretching toward the sky, and at their feet, busy businessmen moving about in a hurry. The sight is almost overwhelming. When I arrive at my destination, an imposing building comes into view. Its glass facade gleams in the morning sun, radiating an undeniable presence in the heart of the city. This is the headquarters of the company I work for. A few years ago, the company, which had been based in the countryside where my mother's family lived, relocated to this massive city. Maybe it was fate that brought me back here. Thinking about that, I pause in front of the entrance, take a deep breath, and remind myself. Today is an important business negotiation. For months, I've been working closely with Harrison, the key contact for this deal. I've spent all this time preparing for this very moment. As I step through the automatic doors, I enter a spacious lobby with a high ceiling, where professionals in suits move about busily. So, this is my company's headquarters. Feeling a sense of pride, I straighten my back as I step into the elevator. From the glass-walled elevator, I can see the cityscape spreading below, filling me with a strange sense of exhilaration. As my focus sharpens, I can feel my heartbeat quicken. When the elevator reaches the upper floors and the doors slide open, a vast office with neatly arranged desks stretches before me. Bright lighting enhances the refined, modern design of the space. The meeting I'm about to step into is a major negotiation, a deal worth $10 million, one that will directly impact the company's future. At the scheduled time, I make my way down the corridor leading to the conference room. Adjusting my collar, I mentally prepare myself once more. I knock on the door and announce, "Excuse me," before stepping inside. Seated quietly at the far end of the room is my negotiation counterpart. To my surprise, it's none other than my middle school classmate, now the CEO of the company I'm dealing with, Amber. Sorry to keep you waiting. I bow slightly and meet her gaze, taking in the sight of a woman who still holds traces of the girl I once knew, yet has transformed into someone completely refined. Her sleek black hair cascades over her shoulders, accentuating her flawless, porcelain-like skin. Her high-quality yet understated suit highlights her stunning figure, and her poised posture commands attention. Her eyes, locked onto mine, exude confidence, intelligence, and the dignified presence of a CEO who knows her worth. Back in middle school, Amber was someone who always stood out in class. With her beauty and intelligence, she was constantly the center of attention. However, for some reason, she always treated me with an unusually sharp and sarcastic attitude. "This is probably too hard for a poor kid to understand, huh?" Amber teased as she glanced at my worksheet. It felt as if all my hard work was being completely dismissed. No matter how much effort I put into studying, she would throw snide remarks at me, saying things like, "You're only working so hard because you're poor, right?" At her worst, she once said, "You study that much, and that's all you've got to show for it?" Honestly, I don't think that's very good. You should try harder if you care about your future. I tried to hold back my frustration multiple times, but eventually, I couldn't take it anymore and confronted her directly, asking why she treated me that way. But all she said was, "I just don't like you," in a short, blunt reply. I couldn't say anything after that, but the frustration lingered deep in my heart. And now, over 10 years later, I never would have imagined that we'd meet again, through work, no less. To top it off, she had taken over one of her parent company's divisions as its CEO. As unpleasant memories from middle school surfaced in my mind, I decided to lock away my past emotions and face her as nothing more than a businessman. Amber, seated across from me, gave me a polite smile. She looked as if she had completely forgotten all the harsh words she had thrown at me back in school. But now wasn't the time to dwell on the past. I told myself that and smiled back at Amber before getting back to discussing work. However, Amber wasn't the only issue. Seated beside me was my boss, Trevor. I would have preferred to handle this negotiation without him, but there was nothing I could do about it. As the meeting progressed, Trevor suddenly let out a forced laugh and said, "Hey, this guy may look like he knows what he's doing, but actually he only has a middle school diploma. So, please go easy on him." All eyes in the room turned to me. My mind went blank, and I could feel cold sweat running down my back. I wanted to scream, "Why the hell would you bring that up in such an important meeting?" But I knew that reacting emotionally would only play into Trevor's hands. I struggled to keep a neutral expression. And then, Trevor went even further. "Well, to be fair, making it this far with just a middle school education is pretty impressive, don't you think?" he said, smirking. Trevor had always been the kind of boss who seemed to take pleasure in undermining me. Even before the negotiation started, I had a bad feeling about Trevor being there. And sure enough, when I saw how his words soured the atmosphere, I couldn't help but feel anxious. It wasn't just embarrassing to have my education exposed, it was far worse to have a boss who would openly discuss in colleagues' private matters in a critical business negotiation. If I were on the other side of the table, I wouldn't want to do business with a company that had someone like that in a leadership position. I could feel my frustration building, but I forced a strained smile and tried to let it pass. Just then, Amber smiled and calmly responded, "Oh, I'm well aware. He and I were classmates in middle school." She remained poised, and for a moment, I had the strange feeling that she had somehow come to my rescue. Trevor looked shocked by Amber's words and then turned to scold me instead. "You should have told me something this important." He made it sound as if I had intentionally kept my connection to Amber a secret. But in reality, I hadn't even known that she would be the one attending this meeting. As I finished preparing for today's negotiation, another colleague approached me, standing in for Trevor, who had already headed to the conference room. Trevor asked me to pass on a message. The person you'll be negotiating with is the CEO. It was only at the very last moment that I found out Amber would be the one attending. Up until now, I had only been dealing with Harrison, Amber's subordinate. Even now, Harrison sat beside Amber, looking surprised to learn that we were former classmates. From his reaction, it was obvious that he had informed Trevor beforehand that Amber would be at the meeting. But since I was usually based outside the headquarters, Trevor had intentionally kept that information from me. It almost felt like he had set me up. Amber murmured quietly, "I didn't expect it to be you, of all people." Her tone carried a mix of surprise and nostalgia. But within seconds, she composed herself and returned to business mode. For her, this was just another deal. There was no room for personal feelings. My name, Kevin, wasn't particularly rare. Even if Harrison had mentioned my name before the meeting, she probably never imagined that her old classmate would be the person sitting across from her today. Despite everything, Amber remained completely composed, living up to her title as CEO. Faced with her calm and graceful demeanor, I couldn't help but think, why was she always so sarcastic to me? As those memories from the past began to resurface in my mind. Back in middle school, when I found out I was transferring to another school, I gathered all my courage and approached Amber, determined to speak with her just once before I left. She was sitting at her desk in the corner of the classroom when I walked up to her and asked directly, "Why do you hate me so much?" She lifted her gaze, narrowed her eyes, and replied coldly, "Do you hate me? It's fine if you do." Her indifference stung. Maybe I did hate her. No, if I were honest, my feelings for her were more complicated than just hate. It wasn't mere dislike, it was something deeper, something I couldn't quite define. Taking a slow breath, I carefully chose my words before speaking. "I'm not asking to be friends. I just want to know what exactly you dislike about me." For a brief moment, Amber's eyes widened in surprise, but she quickly regained her composure and said, "Not really." After a short pause, she added, "Well, as long as we both understand that there's absolutely no chance of us ever liking each other, that should be enough, right?" She never revealed what she truly felt, leaving me with nothing but a vague deflection. That was the last time I spoke to Amber. I had assumed I'd never see her again. Yet here we were, facing each other across a business negotiation table. Even as memories from the past resurfaced, the meeting moved forward smoothly. Just as I was starting to feel a bit relieved, thinking this deal might actually go through, it happened. And then, Trevor spoke. "Well, let's hope everything continues to go well. I mean, this guy only has a middle school education because he was too sick to take his high school entrance exams." Can you believe that? I froze. Again? He was bringing up my personal history again? Fury boiled inside me, but I kept my face neutral. There was absolutely no reason for him to bring this up. There was no apparent benefit for Trevor in exposing my past here. It seemed like he was doing it for no other reason than to humiliate me. Even Harrison, who was sitting next to me, looked unsure how to respond and said, yeah." Seeing his troubled expression only made my anger grow. But I forced myself to stay calm. Then, Amber turned to me with a composed expression and asked, "Illness, was it? What kind of condition?" There was something in her tone, something that felt like sympathy. For a moment, I hesitated. But I regained my composure and answered as evenly as possible, "Just stress." It got to the point where I could barely stand. But I'm fine now. As you can see, I'm doing my job just fine. I never wanted to expose my vulnerabilities in a situation like this, but I felt the need to explain myself clearly to Amber. After all, standing here today was proof that I had overcome my past, and I wanted her to understand that. Harrison gave me an encouraging smile and said, "That's right." But Trevor, as always, failed to read the room and kept pushing. "Well, stress or not, even if you had taken the exam, you probably would have failed anyway." At that moment, something inside me snapped. I couldn't believe the sheer malice behind his words. He even let out a small, mocking laugh before continuing, "Besides, our company usually only hires high school graduates at a minimum. I wonder what kind of connections you used to get in." I clenched my fists under the table. If the client got the impression that our company was a place where people relied on personal connections rather than merit, the deal could fall apart entirely. Trevor's every word filled me with rage. What the hell does he think business is? Still, I forced myself to remain calm. I couldn't afford to let my anger show, it would only hurt my credibility. I tried to suppress it, to swallow it down. But no matter how hard I tried, the fury inside me wouldn't fade. I couldn't stay silent any longer. Harrison had worked hard with me to build trust, and now he was visibly uncomfortable. Still, I had kept my patience up to this point, but doing nothing in this situation just felt wrong. I didn't say anything about my education because I didn't want it to seem like I was bragging, but this is Amber we're talking about. She might throw some snide remark at me, and this deal could fall apart. I hesitated for a moment, but I knew I would regret it if I stayed silent. Still, no matter how this negotiation ended, I couldn't let my company be seen as one that relied on personal connections. That misunderstanding had to be cleared up. I made up my mind. Slowly, I turned to Trevor and spoke. "With all due respect, Trevor, I'm actually a university graduate. I passed the high school equivalency exam and went on to earn my degree from Stanford." The room fell silent. Everyone's eyes widened in shock. Trevor's face twisted in clear disbelief. Amber, however, simply smiled slightly. I had no idea what that smile meant, but it was calm, something I had never seen from her back in middle school. The conference room felt completely silent. Everyone seemed stunned, unsure how to react. Then, Amber was the first to break the silence. If that's true, then you should have no problem solving this." Her eyes gleamed sharply as she began to recite an English passage, her voice smooth and articulate. The way she spoke wasn't just about conveying information, it was as if she was deliberately testing me, challenging my ability. I knew Amber had graduated from the University of Tokyo, but hearing her intelligence in action like this was something else entirely. Even Harrison, sitting beside her, let out an impressed whoa. Even Trevor, for once, seemed taken aback. "Not only beautiful but also intelligent," he muttered, as if in reluctant admiration. Amber turned to him with a smile. "And you? Can you solve it?" Trevor looked flustered for a brief moment but quickly covered it up with a laugh and a shrug. "No way, I didn't graduate from Tokyo University, you know. But for a Stanford guy like you, this should be no problem, right?" he said to me with a smirk. There was a clear hint of malice in his expression, as if he was hoping I would fail. For a split second, irritation bubbled inside me, but I quickly pushed it down and regained my composure. Amber looked at me with a smile and said, "If you can solve this, let's see. All right, I'll sign the contract." Honestly, the deal wasn't bad to begin with. She continued, her tone light and effortless. "And if you solve it, you can do whatever you want with me." "Just kidding." She chuckled, teasing me. "For now. Just translate the English sentence from earlier." At Amber's playful remark, both Harrison and Trevor smiled. No one had expected Amber to say something so provocative. But I didn't laugh. I met her gaze seriously and said, "That's easy." Then, I smoothly translated the English sentence Amber had just read aloud. It was a deep, philosophical text, something that required both knowledge and quick thinking. But for me, it wasn't difficult at all. As I translated Amber's words, I realized how much my studies in America were helping me at this very moment. By the time I finished translating, Trevor was left speechless. Harrison gave me a small, impressed smile. "I always knew you were sharp, but, wow. That was amazing." Amber, however, didn't seem particularly surprised. Instead, she gave me a satisfied smile. Contract approved, she said smoothly, then turned to Trevor. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah, I guess so, Trevor stammered, clearly thrown off. He then glanced at her nervously. So, he was actually right? Amber nodded. Yes. It was a difficult passage. It was from a University of Tokyo entrance exam. At that, Trevor's expression darkened. Ha! I see, he muttered, clearly irritated. With the deal finalized, the meeting came to a close, and Amber's team left the office. After seeing Amber and the others off, Trevor and I returned to the office. Trevor remained silent for a while, his expression tense. Then he let out a deep sigh. He turned to me, his face full of resentment. The air around us grew tense. I ignored him and went back to my work, but I could hear him clicking his tongue in frustration before slumping into his chair. This wasn't new. Trevor had been like this ever since I joined the company. Apparently, he had overheard me casually mentioning to a colleague once, I almost ended up being a middle school dropout. From that day on, he started making snide remarks like, "No wonder you never listened to me." Trevor was the kind of man who sucked up to those above him while dumping all the work onto those below. He never hesitated to push the most tedious tasks onto his subordinates, while he himself clocked out right on time, every time. When I first joined the company as a fresh graduate, Trevor immediately tried to dump extra work on me, overtime, document preparation, all of it. But I simply asked, "Isn't that your job?" A completely reasonable question. That must have rubbed him the wrong way because ever since then, he started treating me like a personal enemy. He would constantly remind me, "People who don't listen to me never get promoted," as if threatening me into submission. I thought about reporting him to HR, but between my heavy workload and everything I had to learn as a new employee, I just didn't have the time. Right now, the only thing I can do is prove that I'm competent to Trevor and everyone else. People won't listen to someone who can't do their job. Determined to change my situation, I grit my teeth and throw myself into my work, pushing through each day. I believed that my achievements would be my best defense. And in the end, my efforts paid off in an unexpected way. Before I even had the chance to report Trevor, my manager came to me with an offer. It was a transfer and opportunity to work at one of our overseas branches. Apparently, my degree from Stanford and my fluency in English made me a perfect candidate. If I could perform well for a few years at the branch, they promised I'd return to headquarters with a promotion to manager. When I heard the news, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. But more than anything, I was relieved to be working far away from Trevor. I accepted the offer and immediately transferred to the overseas branch, dedicating myself fully to the job. Shortly after I left, the company announced that headquarters was relocating to the city. Originally, I had chosen this company because I could commute from my mother's hometown. Now, that was no longer possible. Still, my mother, ever supportive, encouraged me to take the opportunity. Knowing she was cheering me on gave me the strength to push forward. I worked hard, made solid contributions, and after a few years, I was called back to headquarters. When news of my return spread through the company, Trevor was not happy. Apparently, the idea of me getting promoted was absolutely unacceptable to him. Later, I learned that Trevor had personally requested to sit in on the negotiation with Amber, hoping to sabotage me. But in the end, his plan backfired. No matter how hard he tried to drag me down, my performance and results spoke for themselves. The deal with Amber was finalized, and with that, my promotion to manager was officially confirmed. It was the moment when all my hard work finally paid off. Trevor continued to glare at me from his desk. His cold, bitter stare made it clear just how much he resented the successful outcome of the negotiation and my promotion. But his hostility no longer fazed me. Instead, I calmly met his gaze and began considering my next move. I couldn't just let someone like him continue unchecked. If I wanted to grow within this company, he would only be a roadblock. And more than that, I couldn't stand by and watch my colleagues suffer under his unreasonable demands. I decided to take action. I reached out to Harrison, the person I had worked with on the Amber deal. "Hey, I need to talk to Amber," I told him. I thought he might hesitate, but instead, he agreed immediately. The next day, I got Amber on the phone. From the other end of the line, I heard Amber's calm yet slightly suggestive voice. "You calling me?" What, feeling nostalgic? I did want to know why she had always been so cold to me back then. But that wasn't what I needed to talk about today. No, that's not what I meant. I'm talking about what you said during the negotiation. If you solve the problem, you can do whatever you want with me. You did say that, right? Were you serious? I brought it up casually, just as a former classmate. I worried she might take it the wrong way, but after a brief pause, she suddenly laughed. "Oh, come on. What do you want me to do?" She sounded genuinely entertained. Her reaction caught me off guard, but I quickly composed myself. "It's nothing weird. It's about Trevor." "Ah. Trevor, huh?" Amber's tone noticeably dropped. But I continued. "He's a problem. And I need him dealt with. Could you file a formal complaint about his behavior during the meeting? Say that he disrupted the negotiation with irrelevant chatter and wasted time. If you report it directly to our CEO, it'll carry weight." I wanted to expose the fact that Trevor wasn't just incompetent, he was actively disrupting business operations. "Amber, you're the CEO. It wouldn't be strange if you wanted to speak with our CEO, right?" I pleaded with her sincerely. Amber stayed silent for a moment, then finally said, "Well, all right." I had expected some resistance, but she agreed surprisingly easily. I couldn't help but feel grateful. "Thank you," I said sincerely. Just as I was about to hang up, Amber suddenly asked, "By the way, I heard you were sick?" Her words caught me off guard. After a brief hesitation, I decided to tell her the truth. "Yeah. That was because of you. I'm fine now, but all your jabs and taunts back then built up into so much stress that I actually got sick. My mom was so worried she moved us to a quieter place with more nature. But, in the end, it was for the best. Changing environments helped. And, well, I worked my ass off to get where I am today." As soon as I said it, doubt crept in. Can I really say this to the CEO? I wondered. Amber responded casually, "Is that so?" Then she added, "Well, for now, you're okay, right?" I couldn't help but think, wait, is she actually worried that this might be affecting my work? So I answered honestly, "Yeah, I'm really fine." Amber simply replied, "Oh, I see." Her tone was indifferent, yet for some reason, her words stuck with me. The Amber I knew in middle school would have laughed at me alongside Trevor. But now, she was different. And then, I realized something else. The University of Tokyo question she had posed during the negotiation had completely shut Trevor down and secured the deal. Summoning my courage, I asked, "Be honest. Did you ask that question for me? To shut Trevor up?" There was a brief silence before she spoke. "Not just for you." Harrison looked uncomfortable, too. "And proving competence quickly? That was the easiest way." Even though her voice was as detached as ever, I could sense the subtle consideration behind her words. I quietly said, "Thanks. Hey, Amber. If I ever did something to you in the past, I want to apologize. Please, just tell me, why did you treat me that way?" I had been wondering about it for so long, and this time, I was determined to get an answer. After a brief silence, Amber responded in a slightly softer voice, "Yeah, we'll be working together from now on, after all. But I have work to do right now." "How about we meet up somewhere and talk later?" she suggested. Her unexpected suggestion made my pulse quicken. A few days later, we met at a quiet cafe, sitting across from each other. I was a little nervous, but when she greeted me with a simple hey, her relaxed demeanor put me at ease. I was about to start with some small talk when Amber, without hesitation, got straight to the point. "I want to talk about your parents." A strange unease stirred in my chest. I had never thought much about my family history, but something in her tone told me she was about to reveal something significant. What she said next turned my world upside down. According to her, my mother and her biological mother were the same person. I was speechless. The idea that Amber and I shared a connection through family had never even crossed my mind. As she continued speaking, fragments of my childhood memories began piecing themselves together. My biological mother had passed away when I was very young. And shortly after, my father remarried to Amber's mother. That meant we weren't blood related, but we had been entangled in each other's lives since childhood. As I sat there, stunned, Amber continued. She revealed just how difficult her upbringing had been. Amber's father was cold toward his wife for not giving birth to a son. He also pressured Amber, telling her anything other than Tokyo University is unacceptable, and refused to acknowledge her as his child unless she proved herself exceptional. And in the end, he had left her mother for another woman the moment he found out she was pregnant with a boy. As soon as the gender was confirmed at the clinic, he threw Amber's mother out and remarried. Amber's voice was steady as she spoke, but I could feel the weight of her words. "And that's how I lost my mother," she said quietly. Apparently, Amber's father refused to give up custody. I stayed silent and continued listening to her. She had once attended a private elementary school, but after the divorce, she was forced to transfer to a public one. Even though he refused to give up custody, he wouldn't allow Amber to live with him and instead sent her to her grandparents' house. Because of that, she had no idea where her mother went or what she did afterward. And as for me, I never knew any of this. Before I realized it, my father's new wife turned out to be Amber's mother. That final winter break of elementary school, Amber set out on a mission to find her mother. She had always wondered where she was. Then, one day, near her grandparents' home, she spotted her mother walking down a shopping street with my father. Her heart must have been pounding. Summoning all her courage, she called out to her mother. Her mother immediately recognized her and pulled her into a tight embrace. As Amber recalled this memory, her expression was complex, a mix of joy and pain. My mother kept saying, "I'm sorry," over and over. But I was just happy to see her, Amber continued. That was when she learned her mother had remarried and had a son. And that son was me. At the time, though, Amber hadn't thought much about me. All she cared about was being close to her mother again. Hoping to see her more often, she begged her father to let her attend the same public middle school as me. Maybe because he finally had a son, my father just said, "Yeah, sure. Just make sure you get into Tokyo University," and didn't push the issue any further. And so, Amber enrolled in my middle school. Now, I finally understood the reason behind her behavior back then. She hadn't known how to approach me. I couldn't tell if she wanted to build a closer relationship with me or if she was just pretending not to know something. But either way, she must have been struggling with her own feelings. But the moment I saw your father and mother together at the entrance ceremony, I just couldn't take it anymore, Amber said calmly. "I'm the real family," she admitted, revealing what had been in her heart back then. I could finally grasp the depth of her jealousy. That was why she had looked down on me, trying to convince herself that she was the one with a better life. It was the only way she could keep herself together. Understanding that now, I had no words. The woman sitting in front of me was speaking of the past so matter-of-factly. But beneath her composed tone lay a childhood filled with loneliness and resentment. "But I still met with my mother in secret," she continued. "I once told her, I can't stop saying cruel things to him, and she just sighed and said, 'Well, of course you can't.' Leaving behind the words, "I promise I'll come see you," my mother took me away from Amber and decided to have me live somewhere she couldn't reach. It was a decision meant to protect us both. A complicated mix of emotions churned inside me. But after I left for the US, Amber was able to reunite with her mother. They met often, rebuilding what was lost. His mother had planned to tell him after he graduated from college, thinking, "It's about time my son knew the truth." But Amber refused. "I'm fine with him hating me forever. He had nothing to do with it, I just took out my frustration on him. This is my punishment," she told his mother. Respecting Amber's decision, his mother simply smiled and said softly, "It'll be okay. You're both kind. You'll understand each other someday." And now, here she is, standing before me, having told me everything. After listening to her story, he gently took her slightly trembling hand and said, "Thank you for telling me. You've been carrying this burden for so long, Amber." She silently accepted his touch, a look of relief washing over her face. A few days later, Amber formally reported Trevor's workplace harassment to the company president and, with the help of her colleagues, moved forward with filing a complaint against his actions. As a result, Trevor was pushed to the sidelines. His pride wouldn't let him endure it, and he ultimately resigned on his own. Ironically, when Trevor resigned, I later heard that he left looking frustrated after overhearing the very juniors he had dumped all his work on whisper. So much for having a college degree. Sometime later, I caught wind of a rumor that he was now working as a janitor in a small office building, and for some reason, I felt a bit relieved. As for Amber and me, our work was going well, and her company's performance continued to rise. One day, on a whim, I said, "Amber, maybe you should start your own business. You're incredibly smart. And I'm sure you'd do just fine even without your father's influence." I still remember the way her eyes lit up at that moment. A few years later, Amber launched her own fashion brand. Starting with a small team, she poured herself into her work, designing clothes with passion. When Amber modeled the clothes she designed herself, her great sense of style only added to the appeal, quickly drawing attention. As she personally modeled and promoted the products she produced, people found it unusual and took an interest in her. Her company's recognition skyrocketed. Amber smiled and said, "My income is nothing compared to before, but I feel so much lighter." Every time I saw that smile, I was reminded of the hardships she had overcome and the strength she carried. We started keeping in touch regularly, slowly filling in the gaps of what we couldn't say back then and the misunderstandings we once had. Both Amber and I were working to clear away the lingering tensions from the past, one by one, trying to bridge the distance that had once separated us. One day, something completely unexpected happened. Amber's younger brother, the son born from her father's second marriage, rebelled against their father and asked to work at her company. He had already undergone his father's relentless education regime, making him highly capable. Soon after joining, he secured key clients and contributed significantly to the company's growth. Her father tried to bring him back, calling the company repeatedly. But her brother simply said, "Dad, you know it too, don't you? The environment there is terrible. I can't work in a place like that." He continued working under Amber. Seeing his unwavering determination, I was once again reminded of the strength Amber carried as a member of her family. With his heir gone, Amber's father lost everything he had tried to build. The wife he had married solely for the sake of having a son? Their relationship had soured, filled with endless arguments. Amber's father had nowhere else to belong, so he clung to his job as if it were his only lifeline. And as for the stepmother who had once treated Amber as a nuisance, she, too, was cast aside, ultimately facing the same fate as Trevor. One evening after work, as Amber and I walked together, I handed her a can of coffee and said, "You've really been working hard. Great job." Unlike before, her expression was softer as she accepted it with a gentle thanks. Looking at her innocent smile, I suddenly realized I had been drawn to her without even noticing. Her strength and warmth had naturally pulled me in. Blushing slightly, Amber murmured, "Family is really complicated. But, I don't know, with you, I feel like it might actually work." "Wait. Forget I said that." She smiled, a little embarrassed. Hearing those words, I couldn't help but feel a glimpse of what the future could be. Before I knew it, I let slip, that might not be such a bad idea. At that, she turned red, and before I knew it, I was blushing too. At that moment, I truly thought, with Amber, I might be able to build a wonderful family. And at the same time, I realized something: family isn't about blood ties. She had shown me, through her own life, that a true family is built through mutual care and support. Just as I gathered my courage to thank her and confess my feelings, she suddenly blurted out, "Wait, are you saying you want to be with me?" Flustered, my face turned even redder as I stammered, "Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying." In that moment, I felt a deep warmth and an unshakable trust growing between us. And when she smiled radiant like the sun, I knew, without a doubt, that no matter what the future held, we would walk through it together. I was transferred to a regional branch that had been running at a loss for 5 consecutive years. There, I met a stunning branch CEO who worked tirelessly until 2 a.m. every night. She was handling a critical project, a multilateral business deal worth $30 million that would determine the future of the branch. But on the day of the negotiation, the interpreter suddenly canceled at the last minute. At a $30 million deal, the interpreter just disappeared. How is this even possible? As the panicked branch CEO stood there, I quietly opened my mouth. This is exactly what I'd been waiting for. "Ms. Hartley, leave the interpreting to me." Effortlessly interpreting between 7 languages, I led the negotiation to a successful conclusion. But behind the scenes, an old friend of mine had already begun orchestrating a conspiracy. Betrayal, redemption, and the relentless pursuit of our dreams. Where will our journey take us? My name is Nate. I work at the headquarters of a major corporation in New York. When I arrived at the office first thing in the morning, I found an envelope on my desk. Inside, bold letters stood out: "Personnel transfer notice." The content is the reassignment to a regional branch. Officially, it was just a transfer, but anyone could see the real reason I was being demoted. As the heavy atmosphere settled, Seth, my department head, stood in front of me. "Nate, are you sure this is what you want?" His face showed an unusual hesitation. It was only natural. This transfer was something I had personally requested. "Yes, this is fine. We were just in the middle of restructuring, so to be honest, this helps us. But that branch is in serious trouble. It's been running at a loss for 5 years, and there's even talk of a buyout." "I'm aware. And I still want to go." Sensing my determination, Seth let out a small sigh. "Can I ask why?" I hesitated for a moment before I smiled and answered, "You'll find out soon enough. There's something I need to do at that branch." Seth said nothing more. And so, I packed up my desk and set off for the regional branch. From the outside, the building looked impressive. But the moment I stepped inside, I could feel the difference in the air. A tense silence loomed over the place like a heavy cloud. I guess 5 years of losses will do this to a place. I grabbed my business cards and went around introducing myself to each department. The first stop was the engineering department. "I'm Nate Cansby. Starting today, I'll be working here." A man in his 40s responded. "I see. Tough break, transferring here now." "No, I came here to learn." "Learn, huh? Do you really think we have the luxury for that?" He pointed at a mountain of documents stacked on his desk. "These are all unfinished work. We're drowning here." The strained atmosphere in the room spoke louder than his words. Next, I headed to the sales department. Their reception was just as cold. "Nate, so you got transferred?" "Yes. I'll be working here starting today. Sounds rough. But honestly, we don't have the capacity to take on extra people right now. I understand the situation is tough. Well, things are pretty tense around here, so you'd better watch what you say. That one remark spoke volumes about how stretched thin the employees were. By the time I finished my introductions, I could feel the weight of exhaustion settling on my shoulders. I returned to my desk, sat down, and glanced around. Everyone was silently staring at their computers, with barely any conversation happening. So this is the reality of this branch. The problem this branch faced was clear. They had developed an innovative energy-saving technology, but the research costs had piled up, leading to 5 consecutive years of financial losses. But I came here to change something. Determined, I took a deep breath. No one knew yet how this challenge would reshape my life. After my first day of introductions, I returned to my small, cheap apartment near the branch. The building was old, but it had everything I needed to get by. Not that I had the luxury to care about that right now. As I finished unpacking and opened my bag to prepare for the next day, I realized something. Wait, where is it? My phone was missing. I was pretty sure I had left it on my desk at work. Damn! I had no idea when someone from the branch might try to contact me. Without my phone, I was helpless. Sighing, I decided to head back to the office. At night, the branch had a completely different kind of silence than during the day. The lights were off, and I made my way to my desk in the dim glow. There it is. Finding my phone right where I had left it, I let out a breath of relief. But just as I picked it up, I sensed something. A faint light was coming from the meeting room in the back of the office. Peering inside, I saw someone still working at their computer. Who would be here at this hour? I quietly opened the door to take a closer look. The moment I saw her profile, I remembered. It was Melissa Hartley, the branch CEO. I hadn't seen her earlier that day, but at the very least, I had made sure to learn the name and face of the person at the top. As I stood there, she finally noticed me. Oh. Our eyes met. For a brief moment, she looked surprised, but then a gentle smile appeared on her face. You must be the one who started today. Yes. I'm Nate Cansby, and I'll be working here from now on. Ms. Hartley slowly walked toward me. The exhaustion was evident on her face. What brings you here at this hour? I left my phone behind, so I came back to get it. I see. Forgetting something on your first day, rough start. She chuckled softly as she spoke. But there was a subtle sadness in that smile. You really picked the worst possible time to be transferred here. What do you mean? She sighed quietly as she returned to her computer. This branch is on the brink of shutting down. There's an ongoing discussion about selling off the business. That's why everyone is on edge. Her voice carried a deep exhaustion. Yet, at the same time, I could sense a strong determination within her. Ms. Hartley's words echoed through the quiet, heavy office. But this doesn't really concern you, does it? You just got here. Yes, of course it concerns me. Now that I'm part of this branch, I have a responsibility too. Her eyes widened slightly at my words. She looked surprised, but a soft smile soon formed on her lips. You're serious, Nate. It's just how I am. A brief silence fell between us. Ms. Hartley lowered her gaze to her computer, then spoke as if deep in thought. Actually, a major company from Germany has approached us with an offer to buy our technology. Germany? Yes. They're interested in our energy-saving technology and want to set up a direct negotiation. The meeting is scheduled to take place soon. Her voice was calm, but there was a sense of resolve behind it. But I have no intention of selling our business. You don't? Ms. Hartley looked straight at me. I want us to remain the provider of this technology. I believe we should refine it ourselves while leveraging large-scale investment. That's my vision. In other words, you're aiming for a partnership agreement? Exactly. Instead of selling our technology outright, we need to be the ones in control. That way, we can protect our innovations while expanding into new markets. But it's not going to be easy. She gave a small shrug and a weary smile. That's why everyone in this branch is so on edge. Yes. Because the future of the branch is at stake. I nodded deeply, feeling the weight of the situation settling over me. I had no idea what was coming next, but one thing was certain: this was going to be a turbulent ride. As I listened to Ms. Hartley, I became even more aware of the immense challenges this branch was facing. It's not just the German company, is it? There are other negotiators as well. That's right. She turned her screen toward me, showing a list of companies. Along with Germany, companies from France, Denmark, Spain, China, and India will also be participating in the negotiations. That many countries. Our technology has gained a lot of attention in the fight against environmental issues, especially in the energy sector. There's strong interest from multiple countries. Her voice carried confidence, but I could also sense the immense pressure she was under. But with this many players involved, the negotiations won't be simple. Each country has its own agenda, and their interests often conflict. Balancing those interests sounds like a major challenge. A brief silence filled the meeting room. But I didn't hesitate. Even so, I want to help. What? Ms. Hartley looked up in surprise. This technology shouldn't be sold off so easily. I agree with your approach. And as a member of this branch, I want to do everything I can to support you. She blinked in surprise, then let out a quiet chuckle. Nate, you really are serious. It's just the way I am. But I appreciate it. Just hearing you say that makes me feel a little lighter. As she spoke, her expression softened slightly, as if some of the weight on her shoulders had lifted. The future of this branch rested on her. But I wasn't going to let her carry it alone. At that moment, I made up my mind. I would help carry the burden that Ms. Hartley was bearing, even if just a little. On the day of the negotiation, the atmosphere in the branch's conference room was tense. Representatives from 6 major corporations across different countries were joining the meeting online. In preparation for this day, Ms. Hartley had been working tirelessly. Today was a make-or-break moment for the future of the branch. But as the meeting time approached, I noticed something was off about Ms. Hartley. She stood at the edge of the room, phone pressed to her ear, her expression growing darker. No response. No matter how many times I call. Ms. Hartley, what's wrong? She looked up, her face filled with urgency. The interpreter we hired isn't answering. It looks like they're not coming. What? Ms. Hartley let out a deep sigh, pressing her fingers against her temple. At a $30 million negotiation, the interpreter disappeared. How is this even possible? The weight of her words made the air in the room even more suffocating. Is there a backup interpreter? We're trying to find one, but expecting someone to just show up last minute and be fluent in all these languages is nearly impossible. Her voice carried both desperation and helplessness. If this negotiation falls apart, we're finished. As I watched her growing panic, I calmly processed the situation. Germany, France, Denmark, Spain, China, and India. There were 6 countries in total. Each one was a key player in this deal. As Ms. Hartley said, we need interpreters who can translate 6 languages without difficulty, even technical terms. But I could feel the corners of my mouth curling up slightly. This is exactly what I'd been waiting for. It wasn't just about necessity. Languages had always been my passion. Over the years, my interest has led me to master multiple languages, especially those used in international business. At this level of discussion, I had full confidence in my ability to handle the interpretation. Ms. Hartley, leave the interpreting to me. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with shock. What? I understand the required languages. If the interpreter isn't coming, I'll take over. But Nate, are you really sure about this? Her expression was a mixture of doubt and concern. I didn't blame her. It was absurd, some newly transferred employees suddenly volunteering to be the interpreter for a massive international negotiation. Interpreting isn't something just anyone can do. I know. But we don't have time. We can't afford to sit here waiting for someone who may never show up. When I said this, Ms. Hartley nodded lightly as if she had realized something. All right. But if you feel like you can't handle it, let me know immediately. Understood. The large monitors in the conference room flickered to life, displaying the faces of the international company representatives one by one. Each of them greeted the group in their respective languages. Ms. Hartley cast me a worried glance. Are you really sure about this? Trust me. The first to speak was the German representative. Good morning, everyone. Shall we begin the meeting? Without hesitation, I smoothly translated. Good morning, everyone. Let's move on to today's agenda. Next, the French representative started speaking. This meeting will hopefully be a productive one. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope today's discussion will be meaningful. Ms. Hartley's eyes widened in surprise. He's really translating. I heard her quiet murmur, but I stayed focused. The meeting was progressing smoothly. Ms. Hartley operated the slides, projecting the proposal onto the screen. Although each company had already received translated documents in advance, all eyes were now fixed on the presentation displayed on their screens. Our proposal today is about the global expansion of products utilizing our new material. Her voice was calm but firm. Specifically, we are seeking capital participation from each country's companies to establish sales networks in their respective markets. The manufacturing will remain in our country to ensure consistent quality. The representatives examined the documents with serious expressions, listening intently. In addition, each country will contribute in specific areas. For example, France will handle design, Denmark will oversee technological validation, and China will be responsible for establishing the mass production framework. Ms. Hartley then moved on to explain the profit distribution. Profit sharing will be determined based on initial investments. Transparency will be our priority to ensure all parties find the terms acceptable. A brief silence fell over the meeting room before representatives began voicing their questions. This was where the real conflicts between countries would start emerging. The German representative raised his hand first. What about control over the project? It would be most efficient if we were the majority shareholders. Ms. Hartley's gaze sharpened slightly. Control will not be concentrated in any single country. This will be structured as an equal partnership. The German representative frowned. But won't that slow down decision-making? Ms. Hartley hesitated for a moment before responding. Key decisions will be made through discussions by a joint committee. This approach ensures that all countries' interests are considered, leading to the best possible outcome. Next, the Danish representative spoke up. What about safety regulations? Under our standards, the current specifications are insufficient. Stricter regulations will be necessary. Ms. Hartley calmly flipped through the documents. We will comply with each country's safety standards flexibly. However, excessive regulations could significantly increase costs. So we aim to set practical standards. The moment she finished speaking, the Chinese representative jumped in. The production facility should be relocated to our country instead of the US. We can dramatically reduce mass production costs that way. Ms. Hartley's expression tightened slightly, but she chose her words carefully. Keeping production in the US allows us to maintain quality control. However, we will rely on China's cooperation in establishing a scalable production system while prioritizing quality. A brief silence followed. Everyone in the room watched closely for the reactions of the international representatives. Then, the Spanish representative spoke. Our priority is securing market share, particularly in Europe, where competition is fierce. Ms. Hartley nodded in acknowledgement. Market competition in each region will be addressed through coordinated sales strategies to maximize overall profitability. We cannot allow any single country to dominate. Finally, the Indian representative spoke. We prioritize pricing. No matter how high the quality, if the cost is too high, the market won't accept it. Cost reduction is essential. Ms. Hartley let out a quiet breath and responded in a composed voice. Cost efficiency is crucial, of course. However, cost-cutting measures must not come at the expense of quality. Striking a balance is key. With that, the round of statements from each country's representatives concluded. The discussion was heating up. Each country was prioritizing its own interests, showing no signs of compromise. Ms. Hartley remained composed, but I could tell she was under immense pressure. This is just the beginning. The real battle starts now. The meeting was about to enter an even more intense phase. Ms. Hartley stayed firm as she continued presenting her proposals. As the discussion progressed, she elaborated on the specific plans for market expansion using the new material. The representatives from each country studied the documents with keen interest. Even through the screen, it was clear that they had a certain level of interest in the proposal. This proposal will allow each country's companies to leverage your strengths and maximize your profits. After a brief silence, the French representative spoke up. An interesting proposal. If this technology is successfully implemented, it would certainly enhance market competitiveness. Several other representatives nodded in agreement. But in the next moment, the German representative spoke in a cold tone. However, a buyout would be far more efficient. We should provide full capital investment and take over all decision-making. That would be the best course of action. The atmosphere in the conference room tensed instantly. Ms. Hartley's expression hardened for a brief moment as she prepared to respond. But I stepped in first. I understand your perspective. However, the goal of this proposal is to establish an equal partnership. The German representative furrowed his brows and stared at me through the screen. An equal partnership? That would only add unnecessary complications. In the short term, it might seem that way. But in the long run, fostering equal cooperation among all partners will maximize the overall market benefits. It's a more sustainable business model. Wouldn't you agree? The German representative fell silent, considering my words. Ms. Hartley gave a small nod and continued her explanation. Next, the Danish representative spoke up. Could you elaborate on the safety regulations? Under our standards, the current specifications are insufficient. Stricter regulations will be necessary. The Chinese representative immediately pushed back. Stricter regulations? That would drive up costs significantly. That's not practical. But we can't afford to neglect safety. Our country has stringent regulatory requirements. I took a moment to organize their concerns before responding calmly. Both perspectives are important. Safety regulations vary from country to country, but by aligning with international standards, we can find a balanced solution that works for all parties. The Danish and Chinese representatives exchanged looks before nodding slightly. The French representative then raised his voice. We will take the lead on design. We have no intention of letting other countries interfere. His assertive statement caused other representatives to frown. That won't work. Each region has different design needs that must be considered. Just as the discussion was about to spiral into chaos again, I intervened. Design is a crucial aspect, but regional preferences must also be taken into account. A joint design team should be formed to incorporate input from each country while maintaining a cohesive brand identity. The representatives gradually started to accept this approach. Then, the German representative, still maintaining a strong stance, spoke again. I've listened to everything so far, but in the end, we should hold 51% of the shares. That way, decisions can be made more efficiently. This statement immediately sparked resistance from the other representatives. That would be unfair. It would undermine the whole point of shared risk and investment. Capital should be distributed evenly. That's the most stable approach. The discussion once again became tense. I took a deep breath and spoke in a calm, steady tone. A decentralized ownership model, where all countries contribute equally, would be the most optimal structure. Let me present some specific figures to illustrate why this model maximizes total profitability while reducing risk. As I displayed the data on the screen, the representatives studied it carefully, and they slowly began to nod in agreement. As the meeting neared its conclusion, none of the countries were willing to completely back down. At that moment, I made a final proposal. I'd like to present a new approach that integrates cultural backgrounds and national values into our strategy. Ms. Hartley looked at me in surprise but quickly nodded. We propose distributing production facilities across multiple countries to reduce transportation costs. Design and safety standards will be managed by an international joint committee for flexible adjustments. Additionally, a revised profit-sharing model will be introduced to optimize overall gains for all parties. A long silence followed. Then, one by one, the representatives nodded in quiet agreement. Ms. Hartley turned to me and gave a small, approving smile. "You did an incredible job, Nate." "Thank you." The negotiation had finally reached an agreement. As the meeting concluded, the tension in the room eased. One by one, the representatives exchanged farewells, confirmed the schedule for the next meeting, and disconnected from the call. Once the room fell silent, Ms. Hartley let out a small sigh. "It's over. I'm just glad it ended well." She turned to me and stared intently, her expression a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Nate, how were you able to interpret so fluently?" "Well," I hesitated for a moment. Ms. Hartley pressed further. "And it's not just that. You knew intricate details about our company's technology far more than an average employee should know." Her words were sharp, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. "I never intended to hide it." "No one ever asked." "Hide what?" I took a deep breath and finally revealed the truth. "Actually, I developed this technology." Ms. Hartley's eyes widened in shock. "What?" "I was originally an engineer. My friend and I started a company to develop this technology. Back then, we saw the potential of energy-saving innovations and wanted to make them a reality." Memories of those days came flooding back. My friend's name was Sean. The two of us launched a small startup. He handled financing, while I focused on development. Things were going well. At first. "Then why aren't you still running it?" I let out a bitter smile. The problem was funding. As our research progressed, development costs skyrocketed. We simply didn't have the capital to sustain it. So eventually, you ran out of money. Exactly. That's when Sean told me he had connections with an executive at a major corporation. He believed that securing funding from them would ease our financial struggles. And I was against it. Relying on a big corporation meant losing control over our own technology. But Sean went ahead and negotiated behind my back. Ms. Hartley's breath hitched slightly. I wanted to complete this technology with my own hands. But Sean had a different priority. He put financial survival first and handed everything over to that executive without my consent. He ignored your opinion? Yeah. Our company was absorbed, and we lost all rights to our own research. I paused for a moment, then continued. But I realized something back then. The technology itself wasn't lost. Someone, somewhere, was continuing its development. So you started investigating? I nodded quietly. Yes. And eventually, I discovered that my technology was still being researched right here, at this branch. Ms. Hartley stared at me in disbelief. Then the reason you joined this company was? Yes. I joined to follow this technology, to see where it had ended up. You went that far? This technology is my dream. I couldn't just let it go. I tightened my expression slightly. But I realized that working at the headquarters was meaningless. The real work, the heart of the project, was happening here. At this branch? Yes. That's why I requested the transfer myself. Ms. Hartley's eyes widened in realization. I told my superiors that I wanted hands-on experience in the field, but in reality, that was just an excuse. My true goal was to get transferred to this branch. Are you saying you deliberately let yourself be demoted? That's right. I needed to be here to see this technology with my own eyes. Ms. Hartley remained silent for a moment, absorbing my words. Then, she finally spoke, her voice calm yet firm. You've truly dedicated your life to this technology. Yes. This isn't just a job to me. She let out a deep breath and met my gaze. You've been carrying this burden alone all this time, haven't you? I gave a small nod. But you're not alone anymore. What? From now on, let's complete this technology together. Let's make this dream a reality together. Her words made my eyes widen in surprise. Ms. Hartley. She gave me a quiet smile. This technology doesn't belong to just you. It's something we'll build together as a team. Her expression was resolute, unwavering. Her words resonated deep within me. From that day on, I fully immersed myself in the development efforts alongside the branch's engineers. At first, the team was wary of me. But gradually, things began to change. The head of the engineering department started accepting my proposals, leading to increased success rates in our experiments. The sales team, seeing progress, grew more motivated and enthusiastic. Before long, I had become a key figure in the branch. This is where I belong. Coming here was the right choice. The development team was steadily bringing the technology closer to completion. Ms. Hartley also began relying on me more, seeking my input on critical decisions. Nate, I'm counting on you for the next phase as well. Of course. Leave it to me. The branch's atmosphere was slowly transforming, lightening up, smiles were returning to the employees' faces. This place was becoming invaluable to me. Just when things seemed to be progressing smoothly, an unexpected issue arose. The material costs are exceeding our projections. In the conference room, Ms. Hartley spread out the documents before us, her expression troubled. With every prototype we produce, the amount of raw materials we need increases. And to make matters worse, procurement costs have recently gone up as well. I reviewed the reports and nodded gravely. This is going to push us over budget. I don't want to slow down development, but at this rate, we'll exceed our financial limits. I fell into deep thought. Given our branch's current situation, securing additional funds independently would be difficult. Ms. Hartley let out a sigh. I reached out to headquarters for additional funding, but they said they can't allocate anything immediately. Then what's our next move? They told me to consult with a person in charge in the finance department. Apparently, they'll handle the funding and procurement adjustments from their end. A person in charge in the finance department. Yes. Since headquarters will be overseeing the arrangements, I need you to go and meet with them in person. Something about this didn't sit right with me, but at the moment, we had no other options. The next day, I headed to the finance department at headquarters. Ms. Hartley had arranged an appointment in advance, so I was quickly led to a meeting room. Now that I think about it, they never told me who I'd be meeting. The conference room door opened, and I stepped inside. Sitting there was Sean. Sean? Sean's eyes widened in surprise when he saw me. I never expected you to show up. After a brief silence, he stood up from his chair with a wry smile. It's been a while, Nate. I stood there, speechless, staring at Sean. Finding out that the finance representative from the headquarters was Sean sent a small wave of unease through me. Surprised? Well, I can't blame you. You're the one handling finance? Sean shrugged and gave a sarcastic smirk. That's right. After the acquisition, the higher-ups at headquarters set up a position for me. Now, I'm in charge of finances. You've moved up in the world. You've changed a lot too. Back then, you were just some tech geek. Now, you're even working as an interpreter. I ignored his remark and got straight to the point. I'm here to discuss material procurement. We need your cooperation to keep the branch project running. Sean fell silent for a moment, then let out a light chuckle. Relax, Nate. I have no intention of getting in your way. Can I really believe that? Sean leaned on the table, locking eyes with me. There's no benefit in sabotaging you, is there? As someone from headquarters, my job is to maximize the company's profits. I wouldn't do anything to betray you. I wasn't sure how much of that I could trust, but right now, we needed both funding and materials. Besides, if I pull some strings, material procurement will go much more smoothly. I'll help with your project. Material procurement? That's right. If I make the calls, negotiations with suppliers will move faster. That works out well for you, doesn't it? Sean kept his gaze on me, a smile still on his face. There was something unsettling about that smile, but I had no reason to refuse his help. All right. I'll count on you. Good answer. This is just business, after all. With Sean's involvement, material procurement indeed became more efficient. However, a lingering sense of unease remained in my chest. Since Sean started handling procurement, the materials had been arriving smoothly. But development had clearly slowed down. Something's not right. We have all the materials we need, so why is progress stalling? The development team was sluggish, and morale at the site was noticeably low. Work was getting delayed, and more time was being wasted. Ms. Hartley seemed to have noticed the issue as well. In the conference room, she furrowed her brows while looking over the labor cost report. Labor costs are going up. The project is behind schedule, yet expenses keep increasing. Something's clearly wrong. Ms. Hartley closed the report and let out a troubled sigh. Headquarters has been reaching out too. They're questioning whether the branch is being managed properly. I hesitated for a moment but then made up my mind and spoke. Ms. Hartley, I think the finance department. Sean might be involved. Ms. Hartley's eyes widened in surprise. Sean? Yes. Material procurement has gone smoothly, but development has slowed down. The timing is just too convenient. Ms. Hartley narrowed her eyes, deep in thought. I don't think we should trust Sean. But the words she spoke next caught me completely off guard. But Sean said, I know they're doing their best. What? Ms. Hartley lowered her gaze slightly and continued in a quiet voice. He also said he would speak to the higher-ups. He's going to explain the situation at the branch to headquarters and try to secure additional support. I was at a loss for words. Sean said that? Ms. Hartley gave a small nod. He's trying to help the branch too. Something about her words didn't sit right with me, but she continued. Nate, are your personal feelings clouding your judgment? No. I wanted to deny it, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that my distrust of Sean was affecting my ability to think objectively. I couldn't help but wonder. Even after that, The project delays continued. The development team grew more exhausted, and morale steadily declined. Something was definitely wrong. I could feel it, but I still couldn't pinpoint the exact cause. Then, one day, Sean visited the branch. After spending a long time in a meeting with Ms. Hartley, I saw the two of them walking out together. I approached them and spoke up. "Sean, what were you talking about?" Sean gave a small shrug and smirked in that usual, sarcastic way of his. "We were discussing material procurement. And a bit about site management too." Ms. Hartley cast her eyes downward, looking somewhat apologetic. Sean continued. "Ms. Hartley, isn't the real problem Nate?" For a moment, I was speechless. "You're saying it's my fault?" Sean nodded without hesitation, completely unfazed. "I'm not blaming you. But the site management seems to be falling apart. The workers are disorganized, and progress is slow. Isn't that the manager's responsibility?" I was about to argue back, but Sean kept talking. "Maybe the person in charge of the site just isn't the right fit." That one sentence hit me like a knife to the chest. Ms. Hartley looked at me, her face filled with uncertainty. "Nate, is there anything you can think of? I've been keeping track of the site and managing things accordingly. I don't see any issues." Sean spoke again, his tone deceptively kind. "But in reality, the project is behind schedule, isn't it?" "That's a fact." Ms. Hartley's expression wavered, and she fell into deep thought. A few days later, a development meeting was held at the branch. As the team gathered to discuss future plans, Ms. Hartley suddenly spoke up in a calm voice. "Nate." "Yes?" She hesitated for a brief moment but then seemed to steel herself before continuing. "You're being removed from this project." The air in the conference room froze instantly. "Why?" Ms. Hartley's face was pained as she slowly began to explain. "With all the ongoing disarray at the site, we need to reassess the management structure from a different perspective. We can't afford any more delays." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I'm being removed from the project?" Ms. Hartley avoided my gaze and gave a quiet nod. "It's a necessary decision to restore order on site. But I've been more dedicated to this project than anyone." There was hesitation in Ms. Hartley's expression, but she said nothing more and proceeded to conclude the meeting. After the meeting ended, I returned to my desk, lost in thought. A deep frustration welled up inside me. This project is my dream, and now I'm being removed from it? I clenched my fist on the desk, tightening my grip. But I can't let it end like this. I need to find out what Sean is up to. I made up my mind I was going to uncover Sean's schemes. To protect the branch and the project, I had to expose his wrongdoing. From the day I was removed from the project, I sat at my desk, deep in thought. The frustration burned in my chest, but I couldn't let it consume me. I had to find a way to expose Sean. As I was thinking of my next move, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. It was Seth, a department head from headquarters. "Hello, this is Nate." "Nate? Do you have a moment?" His voice carried a sense of urgency. "Yes, I'm free." "What's going on?" After a brief silence, Seth spoke in a low voice. "There's something you need to know." "What is it?" "It's about your old friend, Sean." I instinctively leaned forward. "Sean has been making deals with the supplier behind the scenes. He's manipulating procurement prices and siphoning off money." "What?" My heart pounded at Seth's words. "And that's not all. He's been bribing some of the project members to deliberately sabotage your reputation. He's bribing the team members. The chaos on site isn't your fault. Sean orchestrated it." I clenched my fists tightly. Seth's words struck deep. "Seth, thank you for telling me. I believe in you. If anything happens, reach out to me immediately." "I will." After hanging up, I exhaled deeply. Sean. So you really were behind all of this. Determined to uncover his schemes, I started moving carefully within the branch. If I made any reckless moves, Sean would catch on. So, I pretended to be cleaning while discreetly checking server logs, warehouse records, and listening to employee conversations. I gathered contracts from suppliers linked to Sean and reviewed project progress reports. Slowly but surely, the evidence piled up. A few days later, I had everything I needed. With the documents in hand, I steeled myself and went to see Ms. Hartley. When she saw me enter the conference room, a look of surprise crossed her face. "Nate? Ms. Hartley, may I have a moment of your time?" She nodded and gestured for me to step inside. "What is this about?" I spread out the documents I had brought and began explaining, showing them one by one. "These are the contracts for the suppliers Sean has been dealing with. And these are the irregular transaction records with those suppliers. When cross-referenced, it's clear that Sean has been manipulating procurement prices." Ms. Hartley's expression grew increasingly severe. "I can't believe this. Furthermore, I have proof that some project members received money from Sean. These individuals have been deliberately stirring up chaos on site." Ms. Hartley fell silent for a moment, then let out a deep sigh and finally spoke. "Nate, I'm truly sorry." "What?" She lowered her head. "I doubted you. But you've been working tirelessly for the branch and the project all along. I just want to see this technology completed." "That's my dream." Ms. Hartley closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Sean hasn't changed at all since the day he betrayed you. More importantly, Ms. Hartley, for now, we have to make sure he doesn't realize what we're planning." "What do you mean?" "We have all the evidence. At the next headquarters presentation, we'll expose Sean's crimes." Her eyes widened in shock. "At the presentation?" "Yes. It's the perfect stage where all the executives will be gathered. That's where we'll reveal everything." After a brief silence, Ms. Hartley gave a firm nod. "Understood. I'll cooperate." With that, our plan to take down Sean was officially in motion. The day of the headquarters presentation arrived. The atmosphere in the executive meeting room was heavy. Around the large, oval conference table, the top executives of the company took their seats, filling the room with tension. And among them, one person stood out the most. Sean. As always, he adjusted the collar of his suit and wore a smug, confident smile. Well, Nate. Fancy seeing you here." I ignored him and quietly focused on preparing my materials. Today, in this very room, I was going to expose him. The meeting began, and it was time for the branch's status report. Ms. Hartley stood and gave a concise explanation of the branch's progress and challenges. "And now, Nate Cansby will provide a detailed report on the project's status." I rose from my seat and projected my slides onto the screen. The first slide displayed an overview of the project and its progress. The next slide was supposed to reveal Sean's fraudulent activities. "Now, if you would take a look at this." But the screen was blank. "What?" Panic surged through me. All the prepared files were gone. "What's happening?" I quickly checked my laptop, but there was no trace of the evidence. Not even a single remnant of the data remained. Then, behind me, I heard a low chuckle. "What's wrong, Nate? Something amiss?" I instinctively turned around. Sean looked at us with a wry smile. He stood up as if he had been waiting for this moment. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I may have just a moment of your time?" The executives exchanged glances before nodding, shifting their focus to Sean. "There is one concern I have regarding this project." Sean began, his voice calm, but his eyes burned with unmistakable hostility. "I've received reports that site management at the branch has been severely lacking, causing major delays in development. After investigating the cause, I have come to one conclusion." I held my breath and stared at Sean. "The issue is you, Nate. your incompetence as a manager. The tension in the room spiked instantly. Every executive's gaze locked onto me. It is clear that he is unfit to lead this project. The site is in disarray, and the employees are exhausted. I strongly recommend that he be removed from this project. My fists clenched tightly. Sean, you're really going this far? Sean confidently scanned the room, ensuring he had the executive's attention before finally turning his gaze back to me. Nate, I'm looking forward to hearing your rebuttal. His cold smile spread across my vision, freezing the air in the conference room. I searched for words, but frustration and urgency clouded my thoughts. Then, breaking the silence, someone stood up. Excuse me. All eyes turned toward Ms. Hartley. She slowly stepped forward, positioning herself at the center of the room. There have been concerns raised about Nate's management abilities. She paused briefly, then reached into the inner pocket of her suit and pulled out a small USB drive. But before we jump to conclusions, I'd like you all to see this. Sean's confident expression faltered for the first time. What is that? Ms. Hartley switched the slide and inserted the USB into the computer. In the next instant, evidence of Sean's fraudulent activities flashed onto the conference room monitor. Irregular procurement records, financial transactions showing the misappropriation of funds, and statements from bribed project members. One after another, the proof of Sean's wrongdoing was laid bare. Sean, you have been colluding with suppliers to artificially inflate material costs. Additionally, you bribed project members to sabotage the branch's development. That's impossible. Sean's face turned pale as he desperately tried to argue. This data is fabricated. There's no way this evidence can be trusted. Ms. Hartley remained firm, cutting off his weak defense. It's not fabricated. This information has already been verified by headquarters' financial audit department. The room erupted into murmurs. Sean, is this true? You'd better start explaining yourself. Sean's eyes darted around, scrambling to come up with an excuse, but there was nowhere left to run. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his lips trembling. He made one last desperate attempt. No, I was just. But under the cold stares of the executives, he fell silent. Sean, if this is true, you will have to take responsibility for your actions. Fraud of this magnitude damages the company's credibility. Severe disciplinary action will be necessary. And so, Sean's crimes were fully exposed before the executive board. He lost all trust from headquarters, and after further investigation, a decision was made to terminate him. The project members who had colluded with him were also dealt with accordingly. With his head hanging low, Sean walked out of the conference room. As I watched him go, I let out a quiet breath. It's finally over. After Sean left, silence filled the conference room. Then, Ms. Hartley stood up once more, scanning the faces of the executives. Nate's contributions deserve proper recognition. Her strong words instantly shifted the atmosphere in the room. This technological development is something he has pursued relentlessly, never giving up. He worked harder than anyone else on site. Not just for the future of this branch, but for the employees who dedicate themselves to this project. The executives nodded silently in agreement. We cannot afford to lose someone like him. The future of this company depends on people like Nate. Those who have dreams and the determination to pursue them. Her words struck deep in my heart. After the meeting, I was reinstated as project leader. Development resumed smoothly, and at last, our new material technology was completed. The innovation made a significant impact on environmental issues and gained worldwide recognition. The company's revenue skyrocketed, generating massive profits. Headquarters even offered me a position among the upper management. But I told Ms. Hartley, I want to keep working at the branch. Why? Because I want to continue creating new technology with you. Hearing that, Ms. Hartley smiled softly. Years later, the branch had grown into the company's central development hub. And as for me and Miss Hartley, or rather, Melissa, we were now husband and wife. One peaceful morning on our day off, we walked side by side, gazing up at the sky. We've been through a lot, haven't we? We have. But I made it through because you were with me. Our hands naturally intertwined. Let's keep chasing our dreams together. Yeah. No matter what challenges lay ahead, we would continue walking forward toward the future we dreamed of.